I'll move one in here. The best places would be here, you know, along these two edges. Unless you don't want to be on the camera,
Well,
in which case where you're sitting is perfect.
Oh, crud. Well, I'm having trouble just, before, are you doing it now, Claude? Has it started?
Yes, it has.
How about giving a girl a break?
Oh, well, you know, it's just YouTube.
Yeah, right.
It's not. And this is the microphone right there.
This is the last time I end up late.
Yes, that's the downside of being late.
All right, so my big problem, oh, God.
No, it's very low res, you know, you see
Oh,
this, you're
I
just this
know.
tiny
Little speck.
little speck in the corner there. It's fine.
Could you reach my water bottle?
Yes, yes.
And, all right, we shall see here what happens this time. Do you ever mind if I close the door?
Oh,
No, I think that would be a good idea, yeah.
They get rowdy in the big room sometimes.
Okay, Town of Carlisle, no internet open. So I don't quite know what this means, open. That's
What's the
Did
next?
it work last time?
It did not. Remember, I consistently have this problem. And of course today it's working. Okay, I think.
Yeah, now you have to log in.
Yeah, but log
So,
in with
the
town,
thguest at carlislemass.gov, and then the password's thguest.
Carlisle, okay.
Now let me think.
Yep, okay, good. You guys know how many times I've tried this and it
Yes.
hasn't worked.
Okay. I have an agenda, but there's only one item on it, the trash.
I got it off the website, thank you. Thank you for asking.
Just, yeah.
Okay.
I sent out a copy of the November 28th minutes, which were pretty brief, since we just talked about the report, and a little bit about the email, town website email.
When did you send them out?
A while back when I did sent out the agenda, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw them.
Does anybody have any questions about the last meeting's minutes?
Well, I tested out the email
Yeah.
and you got it.
Yeah,
So,
Mr. Work.
Oh, I didn't see it. But I guess
He-
it's only going to you.
Yeah, he went on and sent an email and it came to me.
Okay.
yeah,
Seems
and
to
Rob
work.
will forward things to
Yeah.
Lana,
Real
Right.
stuff, yeah.
if anything,
Yeah.
if you get any real,
Yeah, I didn't forward the test to you.
Okay. That's all right.
yeah, cause then Lana will wanna be informed, so Rob,
Yeah.
you can just forward.
Anything, yeah.
I'm just, highly curious,
Comes through, I'll,
so,
We haven't had anything.
forward
yet.
to everybody, yeah.
okay.
So, make a motion to approve the minutes.
Move that we approve the minutes from the last session.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
no O and tomorrow
Yeah,
Did I miss it? Where?
here.
once, you misspelled it
Oops.
the last time it
Oh,
appears in the document.
okay.
What is your email?
HelenRyans@comcast.net. one L in Helen.
Okay, the item, main item on the agenda is the selectmen's report, other than new business, is there any, new business before we jump into the selectmen's report?
No, I don't have anything.
Well, the only thing would be, that Claude and I attended the Council on Aging meeting,
Oh, right,
yesterday. And, Claude was suggesting that it would be a really, beneficial thing if we could go around and connect with the various boards, preferably before, the BOS meeting on January 8th, if we still wanna move forward with that date. And just sort of let them know what we're thinking of and try to get a reaction from people on the board.
that was yesterday.
That was the
Yeah.
Council on Aging, and we'd also like to, we targeted some other boards that we think we should absolutely see before the 8th if we can swing it. It's tough this time of year, but we had the Board of Health,
Board of Health meeting, next meeting is the 15th.
of January. Great.
She called me the other day.
Right, so, I don't know if it's a good idea to just at least connect with the chair of the BOH, just to let them know this is happening and see if they want the if they want, I don't know what they would want, but just to let them know. And then he could perhaps, or she, I'm not even sure who the chair of the BOH is,
Not sure.
but, yeah, that's easy to find
Yeah.
out. The planning committee, I think, would be a good group,
Planning board.
the planning board, Peter
So-
Gilmore.
Will you send them a copy of the draft report and
We-
ask for comments?
No,
or
we
what?
didn't do that yesterday, because we didn't feel that made sense before even this group had a chance to look at the latest
Right.
revisions and before we are
Right.
ready to give it out to BOS. But this was just a broad strokes kind of presentation around, well, this is what we're discovering, and in order to fix the real problem, these are the recommendations. Hi Bob,
Hello?
I didn't wanna.
I don't know, Claude, do you wanna jump in terms of what?
So was there any comments from?
That's what, that's what we're gonna talk about, I think it was
Well,
good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, so there were a number of concerns, right? So one was, I don't use plastic bags, and now you're telling me I have to go buy them, and plastic is bad, and is this all about a company who's foisted this pay-as-you-throw, hoodwinked the state into
Buying their bag.
buying their bags and the whole thing, So that seemed to be somewhat of an outlier, but the other one was something as mundane as, seniors are not as strong as younger people, and if you want to optimize your expenses, you'll want to use the 30-gallon bags because you get more gallons per your dollar. But now, if you really stuff those bags, they're going to get really heavy, and how are you going to actually get them to the transfer station? So they were happy to hear that there were 15 and 8-gallon bags available, and one woman said, "Oh well, the price is not that big a deal. The fact that you weren't getting it as a good deal." We didn't go into specific numbers on what those other bags would cost. So that was the other issue is we pay a lot of taxes, and so this is one of the few things that we get for our services, for our taxes in terms of services. So why are we now all of a
Trying
sudden
to take them away.
trying to take it away? Right? They didn't quite say it that way, but that was the gist of it. Was there another? Well, the other one was, people harped on enforcement. They were like saying the
They
problem
did.
is
Right,
that there are people going to the transfer station who shouldn't be there.
right.
I think that came up, and we didn't bring that up, right? That
No,
was brought up
that
by
was-
several different people.
Exactly.
So there's this notion in town, whether it's accurate or not, that the transfer station is kind of
Wild west,
Yes.
anybody
yeah,
can
yeah,
come
and
in
unenforced. So I say we're selling nickels for quarters. Sorry, we're selling quarters for nickels.
That's right.
And people are taking advantage of it. They know they can go here and get rid of waste, especially as surrounding communities have tighter and tighter restrictions. For instance, in Chelmsford, even though it's curbside, you have to pay $2 a bag if you have more than what fits in the two recycling and solid waste containers that they come and pick up every week. So does that cover it? Were there some other things?
I think that was basically it. There were some surprises, I think, for the people there. I think that they're used to hearing from the recycling committee about, quote, recycling, and this is a different thing. We identified a different problem, and the bigger problem, which is the tonnage, the municipal solid waste tonnage. And I think people were a little surprised by that. Claude had done a great job of getting information about why the municipal solid waste, a big reason why it's a problem, and that's because landfills are shutting down. And there are only 7 landfills in the state now that will accept incinerator ash. One of them is in Saugus, and there's a lawsuit pending against that particular it's Wheelabrator in Saugus because there have been flooding incidents and the ash has breached the pit, basically. And it's a real concern. People are complaining of health risks, etc. So I think what we were in the position of trying to reframe what the real issue is. People think that just doing a better job of recycling is going to fix the problem, but we're not seeing a strong connection between the amount of municipal solid waste from a town and the recycling. The good news is that, if you want to call it this, is that we felt that our recycling record being kind of average with the state isn't anything necessarily to brag about, but in fact it's 36th in the state, which is a good position. That's, top 40 recycling communities, so we're in there. So the overall recycling rate in the state is not terrific, but we're up there and right where we would, it's where we are with regard to other communities in the state. But again, and this is something that is the paradigm shift basically, that we're moving away from talking about recycling. This is not a problem. The municipal solid waste problem is not going to go away if we just do increase our recycling. There's an issue around contamination of recycling, that's a separate issue. But if we're really serious about dealing with the cost and the environmental impact of the trash we generate in Carlisle, we have to focus on municipal solid waste tonnage. And as you know, like I said, we're 36 in the state with regard to our recycling performance, but we happen to be 5th in the state this year with regard to overall tonnage per household of municipal solid waste, the stuff that gets sent away to be incinerated, right? So that's really the thing that's costing the most money and is resulting in the greatest emissions generation and energy loss, basically. So does that sound? So I think it's getting people to think about that.
Yeah, my reaction to reading the report is it should be, very, sort of very linear, very focused. And you want to walk people down the path of focusing their attention on municipal solid waste and not really talk about recycling because, Carlisle's been doing it for years, right? And we have, one of the, so, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to make a dramatic difference by encouraging people to recycle. A lot of people feel that they are doing as much as they can. Helen was just talking about her effort. And there are a lot of people like that in town. So I don't think it makes sense to, focus on that because I think what we haven't focused on is essentially a pay-as-you-throw system because right now, with a $25 dump sticker, there's no incentive whatsoever to limit your trash. And it's also, another example is we have these local collectors, that's they refer to on
Private haulers.
private haulers,
Right.
and they are supposed to, according to the website, on demand produce a list of all the people who they're hauling for, and then they can, somebody can check and make sure that those people have bought their dump stickers.
Right.
But it's unenforceable, because you say, well, show me the list, and they'll show you 3 people, and do you know that they're only doing 3 or 10 or 20 or whatever, so it's, unless you go through their trash and find all the junk mail and say, well, I see 12 addresses in here and you're only reporting 3 things, what's going on?
Right.
So, the point is that, I think so a lot of the enforcement issues are dealt with if you go with pay as you throw, because it's very simple. Everything that goes in this dumpster has to be in an orange bag, and I don't really care if you're a local collector or, and one of the people that complained, oh, we'll have people coming to Fern's from out of town and buying
Buying the
the
bag.
Carlisle bags and then running into and if that happens, I think, okay, it's not the end of the world, because we're at least getting revenue for that, right?
That would,
So I think it'll really cut down, and the experience in Littleton was 50% reduction, when they went. And they had a system that was like ours in the sense there was one fee. It was expensive, but nevertheless.
And they're funded through, not an endowment, they have an enterprise fund, that's Acton.
I
Never
think
mind.
they have an enterprise fund too, in Littleton.
In Littleton?
I believe so.
Okay, because it was self-funded, it wasn't through property taxes. that
In
funded-
Littleton.
In Littleton,
Yeah.
right. So their sticker fee, they were confronted by the fact that, the cost of dealing with waste is expensive, and it goes up, it pretty much goes up like everything else, and they were looking at sticker fees of $300, and that's when the pay-as-you-throw program was introduced. I just wanna mention, Claude said something about the orange bag. There are different colors that the bags come in.
Right.
It's
We
just
could
fun to
pick, we
mention.
could have purple,
Just
blue,
whatever.
it might be
Clear,
good
could
not
be
to
clear.
have clear
They make clear bags.
with a seal on it.
They make
Yeah.
a clear bag.
Yeah,
I-
true. And then you can kind of see what's in it, right. Yeah, so it could be whatever color we want. I think they have it over a dozen colors.
Yeah.
But I think that the important point is actually that if there are going to be user fees for the transfer station, they should be designed to discourage the disposal of solid waste. And the only way to do that is to make it, do the pay-as-you-throw bag thing. And I would argue that we should generate all the revenue and eliminate the dump sticker. Because the dump sticker adds no value in terms of creating incentive, right? So why not get rid of it? And I think also that's a bone that you can throw to people who are saying, hey, look, I'm paying so much money already. Well, look, we're making it better for you. We're going to get rid of the dump sticker.
All the bags would become the sticker.
The bag essentially would become a sticker, but
Proof of living in Carlisle,
right.
in theory. Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
we would still have a dump sticker. You get it for free.
Right.
There is a
Oh.
case study on the
Okay.
website because nominally, yes. I think people are used to dump stickers. I don't know that we should open up the can of worms of saying we'll just get rid of dump stickers completely and it's all about the bags. Because there's recycling and so on and so forth that you can do for free. So
Right.
we don't want people just coming in and dumping off their recycling. Because in some cases we lose money on the recycling, right? So.
Right.
So I think the dump sticker is still important, but it doesn't have to cost any money.
Right.
Right, so, there was Carrie's idea, which I thought was pretty interesting, to model what the true cost of paying out of pocket as opposed to through property taxes would look like. And he was suggesting perhaps kind of modeling it out 5 years, we could do this, and this is what it would look like. Now that would get it totally out of property tax funding and into people paying basically for what they throw away.
Right.
So-
But on average, with no incentive to reduce.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, I mean, just as.
but I think it's a good, because it shows what the scale of the problem is, kind of. And it also shows, that, that the cost of a $2 bag, if you're using, I don't really know, I think some people are gonna be able to get away with, some households are gonna be able to get away with like 24 bags, I would guess, over the whole
Yeah, I
year.
mean, for sure, I mean, we probably throw a bag of municipal the solid waste stuff into the compactor for waste, maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks,
Yeah,
tops, and you do it even less, and that, I guess that's the other, these are the sort of fine details of how many bags do you give people for free.
well, I would think that what we'd wanna do is kind of take the sort of best case scenario where somebody is sort of the maximum recycler, and, say, okay, 12 bags. And you get 12 bags for free.
Could you do it, Ellen?
Yeah, 12 bags for free. So literally, no dump sticker fee, you get 12 bags for free. So if you are the super recycler, you actually, it's $25 cheaper for you per year. And the property taxes are gonna be less too, because, we're talking, even at that rate, if we charge $2.75 a bag, which is the rate that they charge in Littleton, then we can make enough revenue, to lower the property taxes.
Well, lower that line item in the property tax.
Yes,
People
yes,
aren't
that is
going to
correct.
see that
Lower
line
that line
necessarily.
item.
Right.
But-
Make a smaller, the
Make a-
transfer station will make a smaller contribution
Which has been
than the
unheard of.
previous year, right, to property taxes,
Right.
right.
And that money, if it remains in the budget, could then be allocated to something besides bringing
which
trash,
it
right?
would be,
So-
obviously be.
Right. So you had a schedule fee in there, a suggested schedule fee, that you.
Well, yeah, I think I had a little table in the
Right.
report, do status quo and then 3 options, talking about different rates of recycling. But that was all modeled on the notion of a free dump sticker and I think 12 free bags,
Right.
12 33-gallon bags, free, per year. Now, obviously that can be tweaked, you could say, no, we'll do $2.50 or we'll move it up to $3 per bag or, and that will affect, the numbers.
Right. So I'm just curious because this has been, clearly this report has changed pretty dramatically from a lot of discussion around China, which Claude finally convinced me I should drop. I saw that as the way to build up to the need to do this other thing, but it muddies the waters. So, I don't know, what do you 3 think about just this different approach of just like, boom, hitting hard on what needs to happen, which is reducing municipal solid waste?
That's fine with me, that's the focus. I think all of our proposals aim toward that. As you throw, organic diversion, composting, they all.
Oh, well, that was the other thing. People seem to like the idea about the composting, because,
Right.
and we talked about that as a way of reducing, do you compost, Helen?
No, I don't, because we don't have a garden, so, no, I don't.
Okay,
And I read that, and I thought that would be a good idea.
thank you. So that is, a feature that people like, and, at the same time, we would still have bins available for people who wanna do it in their backyards. But then have this townwide thing. And in Acton, they charge nothing for that, and that part, because there is a cost associated with having Black Earth come and pick up the material. If we, do things according to the Mass DEP right way to do things, we could earn additional points, and we could earn up to $9,000. And I haven't costed that out yet, or however you say it, I haven't run that in terms of, well, what would that look like? How many pickups in the course of a year would that give us? But if we're saving money in the other area, then there'd be a little, quote, free cash available too.
Right, I think,
Not
we,
free cash.
yeah, I would like to, propose also push on the notion of using one of the compactors we currently have, to do, recycling, compaction.
Commingling of certain items.
Yeah, and I saw the proposal, that was put forth for that grant. It was talking about not just plastic in that,
Yeah, it was,
Right.
well, it was,
glass,
well,
plastic,
right, it's,
and
so the
tin and
glass,
aluminum.
right, the glass part, the problem, and this is, I thought we had to keep glass out of the commingled stuff, because the real issue is you've gotta separate glass from paper.
Mhm.
So newsprint, mixed paper, you do not wanna mix that with glass. But apparently the glass, they will accept in a commingled batch, and it doesn't, quote, contaminate, the other materials. But if you mix glass and paper, you get, glass is pretty much, there's virtually no value, and we may end up having to pay to get rid of glass, though there is a company now that's crushing glass and using it for asphalt
Mhm.
stuff. But right now, that isn't a major market, but the newsprint is very high value stock, and I think the mixed paper. So if we can keep that separate, but mix everything else, then that makes it a lot easier for residents coming in if
Plus,
they've got.
those two, the paper, even though it's just thrown in, and the newspaper especially, those are about as packed in as you can get
Mhm.
anyways,
Right,
so.
There's no benefit to squishing
To
paper.
compact.
They're already, yes.
It's as dense as
You
it's
can't
got, yeah.
compact it too much.
Yeah, it's a heavy load. It probably, those dumpsters
Oh.
might be at their weight limit, not,
Right.
not limited by
Volume,
volume,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But, the other thing that came up at the Council of Aging meeting, while we were exiting, a resident on the board there said that his biggest complaint was the traffic at the transfer station.
Really?
Yeah, that he gets either blocked in,
Hmm.
or he has to park kind of so far on the periphery, he has to do all his walking, just to avoid getting parked in, and that there's people who, stop at the swap shed and then sort of sit there for a
Socialize,
long
yeah.
time. What'd you say?
And socialize.
And
Yeah.
socialize, right. So what I'm thinking is that, to address that issue, if you have fewer stations, right, then you can free up some space. If you do compaction, you have fewer dumpsters that you need. If we do reduction of municipal solid waste, we'll have fewer dumpsters. So that frees up more room. And that person also said that when they first came to Carlisle, this was never an issue. So Carlisle has grown, in population, and our transfer station's still the same size it was 28 years ago when I first was here.
Well, they did
They
expand a
moved
little
the
bit.
bins back, the
Few
recycling
years
bins
back,
were
they
moved
moved-
back to create an extra lane.
right,
Mm.
because,
For the cars.
and it was Bob basically, but you know Bob, because he's come to us in the past with that
Bob?
complaint,
Oh,
Bob
okay.
Longwell.
Yeah, they
Was
moved,
concerned
I forget how
about
long
the-
ago
the
that was,
parking,
it was,
yeah. Well, we
Yeah,
went
for a
out,
while.
we
They
were
moved the
trying to
shed back
figure
and
out,
they-
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
we
the
put
shed got
cones
moved
out.
back, okay,
Right,
yeah.
and
So
that's-
this,
create a third,
Yeah, we-
third.
another lane kind of,
We
yeah.
Which
measured-
helped a lot.
we
Mhm.
measured everything and put cones out and tested it.
and we were talking about,
We were talking about,
Painting lanes,
lines,
making parking
Yeah,
lines.
well, that we were talking, yeah, that's one of the things I thought of, to make it clear is, okay, this is, because right now, yeah, there's no sort of like,
It's free flow.
flow, it's just random road
right,
cars.
go where you
But I
want.
don't know, I always go on Saturday, which is gotta be the busiest day.
Oh, for sure.
I never thought I ever had a problem getting in or out.
It's been close for me, but I've
3:30
never
to
been.
4:15-ish or,
Yeah,
At the end of the day,
yeah.
Yeah, it's certain time.
Yeah, there's a
everybody
rush
tries to
at the very
end
end.
of the day.
but just, there's a certain, kind of, it's nice to have a little bit of structure around something with people driving around and into a space and moving around and all the rest of it. It'd be nice
Right,
to, and honestly, the appearance of the transfer station, I think is, personally, I think it's an embarrassment. I've thought of contacting the gardening club and saying, is there anything you guys can do? But it needs a lot more than a few plants. But we also don't, sorry,
No,
but,
the buildings aren't aesthetic.
well, it just looks
A few solar panels would be nice.
so well, but that's kind of what this is building up to, is that we've got a chance with the solar canopy planning to
revamp
rethink
things.
that entire thing. You even talked about the forest, right?
Yeah, there's some trees there which are, taking up space, and that could be used to create a little bit of parking and so on. I think there's what was the other, the other thing there are two things I observed going to Acton and to Littleton. One was that in both cases they have a nice little prefab building that
It's
is,
like a trailer.
yeah, it's like a little trailer,
Yeah,
like,
I got it.
it's insulated, it's got double glass,
Yeah.
thermopane glass, it's a real, temporary structure. So the person who's monitoring has a nice seat where they're warm and it's got windows, so they can really see what's going on, and it's situated in such a way they can look at every dumpster and see what's going into them. And I think we would need something like that eventually. And I don't know if we could rent one initially, so that we don't have to have a capital item in the budget to say, okay, and, or rent or lease one. The other thing is that they both, Littleton and Acton, sell dump stickers as well as,
They
so,
do all the business there.
yeah, so in
They sell
Acton
the
they sell the
bags.
bags.
Oh, they sell the
They
bags?
sell the bags in
there?
Acton, yeah, I was there,
Wow.
somebody came in and bought them, they have a little, well, it's not a display really, but they have a little set of shelves, you can buy all three sizes. And they had enough stock so that,
I didn't go into this.
2 dozen people could have walked in and each bought a bag, it would have been fine.
Right.
So, but in Littleton, they don't sell the bags, but they do sell the dump stickers there as well as the, tickets or, to do your bulky items. So, $12 for the microwave, $20 for the refrigerator, that kind of thing. So it seems to me that that's another thing that's gonna have to change. It's hard to imagine that people going to the police station and writing a check each time,
Yeah,
it-
yeah.
I got 2 air conditioners, how much?
Well, the
Yeah,
police
and the-
station isn't, the police department is not thrilled having to do this. They've
That was
done it.
I talked to them this morning.
Right, they never have
And the dispatch guy was like,
Pain in the butt.
Yeah, it was, landed
I-
on them because it had nowhere else to go, they didn't really want it.
Yeah, I think we, and in Acton, you can even use a credit card. I'm not sure about Littleton, but I think so. I'm not
Well,
positive, yeah.
it shouldn't be that tough, you just have to have somebody there with, either the phone or whatever
So,
The little
chip
iPad.
reader
Do we-
is or what have, the
Yeah.
iPad, right, I mean, it's gotten very
do
sleek.
you wanna go through this? How do you wanna?
Yeah, well, Dan,
Did
thank you
send-
for
did you
adding
send-
in track changes or comments, I
Did
took a
you
look
send-
at those and,
Oh, good, okay.
So
Yeah, I
those
just
are-
sent that out this afternoon.
and the acronym sheet. And I do have that RDP stuff, I did think that should go in as a, the recycling dividends program.
Yeah,
I have a copy of that we can stick on here, as well as information about the composting and all the stuff that people could throw in. It's much more expansive than what they recommend for backyard composting. Black Earth takes a lot of stuff.
Can I ask a quick question before we get started, a fundamental thing? I'm still stuck on the Littleton experience of the solid waste dropping by 50% when you go with the pay-as-you-throw. Where did that stuff go?
Well, the conjecture of Chris, who was there, he's a DPW, one of 2 workers that are there in the little, thing. And, he said that, he was there before they went to pay as you throw.
Right.
And, I got the number from him. And his conjecture was that, an example he gave is that people in town used to have, somebody in the neighborhood have a pickup truck, and that person would buy a dump sticker and everybody else would just throw their trash in. And, that kind of behavior changed all of a sudden.
But it's still the same trash being
Same volume.
generated. Are people throwing it in the woods? I mean, it's like, do we really expect that people are gonna decrease the amount of trash they're generating by 50%? That's a lot.
I
That's
know.
a- and I'm
That's-
finding it
Well, I
hard
mean,
to,
a lot of it
Some
is
is
compost.
recyclable stuff.
but
I
we're
mean, if you
talking
got a
about,
stack of
no,
newspapers
but
and
that's
glass,
that's specifically not what we said. We said by increasing recycling, we shouldn't, at this point, we shouldn't expect to see a big
There,
change.
Well, they say that with, the experience has been in Massachusetts with pay-as-you-throw, that the recycling tonnage goes up, but it doesn't go up by the amount that the solid waste
Right.
goes down. So there's that discrepancy between the two. But, so I think, you know, some of it might be, for instance, if you have an appliance or something, you may have the appliance people come and pick up your thing, the old one, as opposed to, well, I don't wanna pay them the $50 cause I can just
Okay.
take it to the dump, or I can have, my friend has a pickup truck, take it
But
to
if
the
we're
dump.
talking about not creating, if we're talking about preserving the environment, it's not really relevant, we're just putting this trash someplace else instead of our own transfer station.
I'd imagine there's some behavioral changes that happen because people think about
Oh, I
what they're
believe that,
buying, you know.
but 50% is a big number.
Well, but
And,
it could be leakage also. It could be that there are people coming into the transfer station or people hauling trash for other people.
Okay, so
Because
you
it doesn't
think,
cost anything.
so you think some of it is
Some of it is,
illegalities?
yes, and so you could argue, yeah, it's just gonna
Okay.
go somewhere else, but it's putting pressure on, in a sense, we're surrounded by pay-as-you-throw kind of communities, right?
Uh-huh,
So there's an incentive to come to Carlisle somehow to get the trash here because it's much cheaper to get rid of it.
so you think a good portion of that 50% is just people not following the rules, as opposed to people cutting back on how much they generate? So
I
it's
would
two
say
really
so.
different issues, right?
Yeah, because it seems that the reduction happens dramatically and quickly.
Right, so it can't be
So
just,
it's hard to believe that it's like a behavioral change.
yeah, okay,
Just to-
I hear you.
So Acton, their numbers show about a 36% drop. And I was estimating easily, I went for a low target of, which I think is achievable, and fairly quickly of 25 to 30. And it could be more than that, but I wanted to just
Mhm.
put it
But
in a bottom.
I think, so in Acton is a much larger town, so they
Mhm.
have a staff of 3 at their transfer station all the time. We have a staff of 1. So our staff is much harder pressed to sort of check dump
Sure.
stickers and things like that.
Sure.
So my guess is that in Acton, they already had pretty good compliance in terms of, okay, you have to have a dump sticker.
Okay,
Whereas we don't have that. So I think, and in Littleton, they're sort of in between, they have 2 people
Hmm.
at the transfer station. So, you know, and the thing about dump stickers is it becomes less important when you have the bags, cause
Right,
you're just looking
right,
at the
right. That's the
dumpster,
idea.
you know, okay, if they don't have a dump sticker, but they have the bags, you know, it's not the end of the world, you know.
so the other piece is composting, getting the organics
Right.
out of your trash. I
That's
guarantee
heavy
you
stuff.
is gonna be
That-
Right, and
at
it is
least a
heavy, right.
20%
You
reduction.
think that's 20%?
Oh, the estimates
Oh
are
my
20,
gosh.
25
Well,
to
according to
35%.
Wheelabrator, when they analyzed their trash, 38% of the trash was organic.
It's heavy,
And
it's
organics, they mean basically just food
food
stuff.
scraps, right,
Food scraps, things that could be composted.
right.
Also, paper towels, you can compost those.
Yeah,
And Black Earth takes a lot, they take bones from meat, they, take meat scraps and things, cause they have large enough rows, composting rows, where they can generate enough heat to create, the composting material with small backyard, bins. It's a little harder to generate that volume, that amount of heat. But that is huge, I can speak to that just from the school program. We reduced the solid to the point where they actually were able to get a smaller trash compactor.
that's amazing.
Yeah, they increased the recycling container, but they got a smaller trash thing, and it saves the town $500 a year. That's not huge, but still, it's better than $500
Well, it's two
more.
different things, it's how
Yeah.
much money you're saving and how much of an effect, a
Right.
negative effect
Right.
on the environment.
Right. And we certainly don't do 100% of the food scrap diversion because we don't take meat or anything like that. But I think that is, to me, that is a huge plus in terms of the pay-as-you-throw program to offer that composting thing, if we can get people to do it. Claude, what are you thinking? Does it make sense or does it make sense?
No, I think composting is, that should be definitely part of the report, because
Yeah.
that will, because of the fact that it's so heavy in terms of tonnage, which is what we're talking about, we're not talking about
Right,
volume,
we're
we're
talking
talking about
tonnage,
tonnage. And, people are going to be like, well, I don't wanna pay more than what I've been paying, I already pay a lot of property taxes, I don't want my dump sticker to go up. Well, if we can say, look, here's a way that you can, get rid of your stuff for free, with the compost, the Black Earth stuff, we wouldn't be charging for that. Then, you can reasonably say, I think, that you might actually end up spending less out of pocket, than you were before.
Right. And those are the behavior changes. Plus, some people, I don't know to what extent this would make a significant difference, but some people like me, maybe you, when I go shopping, I really look at the packaging. And to the extent that I can make choices around packaging and what I buy, you know, I do, because I don't want that, and not necessarily to save the transfer station,
Right.
but because that's just a habit that's developed and kind of an awareness. And I think that we can work on building that awareness and sort of sensitivity to issues like that. I've noticed that a lot of manufacturers now, when they ship, if you buy a piece of furniture or something, or whatever, an item that isn't clothing, I'm finding that I'm not seeing any styrofoam blocks anymore. I think there's less and less of that, because the writing is on the wall with styrofoam. It's gotta go, you know. So people are using more recyclable kinds of materials for that, and I don't know, anyway.
Yeah, you can go to the grocery store and buy bulk, you know, so you buy yourself a
Yes.
container. Or you can say, well, I'm gonna buy the larger
Yeah.
package rather than the smaller one, right? You know,
So,
So-
so, I just had a couple of things, I don't know if you caught it in your edits, but on
What
page
page?
5, you had 20,200 tons.
Yes. Right, okay. Yeah, all right.
Because it says,
Yeah,
it
it's
says
right
pounds,
here.
right? It says pounds in the number below it.
Mhm.
We aren't in the 2,000 to 250 tons per household.
So, Bob, you know what Rob, the thing I'm still not clear on, maybe you're clear on it. Like, in our solid waste tonnage, this was the question that Julia Green keeps asking.
And Helen was just asking.
Yeah, but,
We what's in that number.
yes, because
Well,
it can be separated out.
Well-
Construction and demolition debris, well,
'cause I
we've
did
got it right in here.
I did a calculation, because that, when you raised that point. But if you just take, I mean, we dispose of it, we send 1,800 tons to the incinerator, right?
Well, and that's the number that we're using for
That's-
the ranking.
Yeah, that's what, that's,
That's
and,
the
and
number
that's,
that gets us.
and that's just the stuff from the compactors.
From the compactors, yeah. So the
And- and so
1,800, so
That divided by,
Households.
by 1,800 households times 2,000 comes out, comes out to 2,000
That-
pounds per
that-
household.
Okay, so that does answer,
So
because she
it would be
keeps-
even worse, we would have a worse ranking if we
If the other
included
stuff was-
construction debris and other.
Right, well, that is
Yeah.
supposed to go to a separate facility, which is why he
Yeah,
has that,
yeah,
right.
it's Devon's,
And so
I think,
it's-
is
yeah,
right,
and
right.
it's not supposed to go.
Well, yeah, but I think that's
But-
important, that's the
right.
question Helen was asking, well, you know, people say, why are we so bad, or why are we the fifth? We should
Now,
be like,
now,
you know.
why that number is different from another town, it's where it gets murky.
Well, okay, so.
You mean
the
other
big-
towns may be including
Well,
their other,
They may not be. In other words, we're higher than other towns. For example, Lincoln, why is their number so low? And
yeah,
that's.
are they diverting something that we
well,
aren't?
we have the lowest possible number, in a sense, right? Our 1,800 is only what we're sending to the incinerator, we're not including the you know,
Right,
the
but that number's big compared to
appliances
other-
and refrigerators, because we send those, I think, to
but
Brockton
that
and
that
then
number's big compared to other towns.
Yeah.
We
right,
This is the
so,
number that's big.
so it's not like,
don't know.
in other words, if we try to in other words, we're reporting numbers that are in our favor, make us look as good as possible in this regard, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
okay,
we're not,
right, because we're not
this is the lowest
including-
possible number we
Right.
could report.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
if we,
And it's still high,
it's still high, right, exactly.
and we don't.
So if everybody else does the same thing, then it's apples to apples. If
Right.
they also include other things, then we're sort of cheating by not including those things. But yet we're still number 5, so.
And that's actually one of the reasons why the Mass DEP stopped using sort of the recycling numbers, is they decided they were gonna go strictly to this, because I think they felt they could have they would have a better handle on exactly what's going into our stuff versus Lincoln, et cetera. But I don't know, Julia keeps asking that question, even though I've sent this to her and explained it, so I'm not quite sure why it's not clear, but it just makes me nervous. The white bulky stuff, where is that? I don't see that reflected anywhere on this.
I mean, appliances,
Mhm.
I mean, is that under metal?
I don't think it would be metal, no, and certainly not at 97.
Or, okay, yeah, metal would be, wait, aluminum tin cans is separate. I thought it would be
Could be
metal
metal.
appliances.
Funds could
Okay,
be up, could
wood,
be
wood,
up.
Maybe
would,
97.
wood would be construction and demolition.
Cause the
Yeah,
metal, cause the
metal.
metal number's pretty high, 97 tons.
Yeah, so maybe that is what it is.
Yeah, that would, I would think that would have to include appliances. It's hard to believe that
Yeah.
people are,
That's
It's huge.
a lot of, yes. Okay, maybe that
And
is.
one other
it.
question I had,
But I do know that sometimes people will throw construction debris into the compactors, even though it's banned.
Right.
And that stuff is heavy.
right, I mean, I've thrown 2x4s in there.
Oh.
But I think at the instruction of the DPW staff.
Correct,
Um,
and it's not supposed to.
because I think I think the tipping fee is cheaper.
Well, that's right, but it's
Yeah.
still supposed to be banned from.
It's supposed to be banned.
Right,
Certainly sheetrock would be, right?
right.
Wood, I would imagine, would work well in an incinerator, but
Yeah.
maybe it's banned as well. I don't know.
It is.
It is, okay.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, okay.
which I never understood, why you wouldn't wanna send wood to an incinerator, maybe cause it's not clean wood.
Yeah,
At
I
first
guess if
I've
it's
heard
pressure
that wood-
treated.
Not supposed to be in,
Do you consider
Consider-
wood construction and demolition debris?
well, I consider it something I burn in my wood stove at home,
Well.
you know.
Do you throw logs that you would burn in your wood stove into the
No, but
compactor?
throws wood that's small enough to fit in the compactor, into the compactor. And of course, 15, 20 years ago, they wanted you to do that because we weren't meeting our requirement,
because
we
they
were
were-
paying for
they
stuff.
Well,
Right.
that was
Another issue.
illegal, what they were doing, requiring a minimum amount of trash to get a certain
Well.
cost. That was
Yeah.
illegal, and I discovered that. They stopped it
So I
after
just have a
that.
couple other things, on page 8, one thing I didn't understand, it says what diversion rates?
Where are you exactly?
This one. Diversion rates, what does not bring to the first line, says the town's disposal tonnages have remained stable,
I think they mean recycling percentages.
right.
That's what I.
mid-30s range, or second tonnages slowly
Right,
up.
the diversion rates, because we're talking about what doesn't go into solid waste, but,
The
point
town's
taken.
disposal tonnages have remained stable.
well,
It looks like we're saying the disposal
Recycling.
tonnages are the main, yeah.
I think you mean recycling
Yeah.
percentage.
Yeah.
I made that
Okay,
change.
okay, it just, it makes sense. What's in it.
good, I caught that.
And just one other little thing before we jump, and I wanna get to the page for
Wait a
table,
minute,
but.
wait a minute, wait a minute.
what we-
No, I think I meant, because then it
I think
says,
this
while recycling tonnage has slowly dropped for the past 8 years. So I think what I'm trying to say there is the municipal
What's
solid
the
waste
what's the
tonnage.
mid-30s range referring to?
Well, that's a mistake, that needs to go into under the recycling part.
Okay, that's the thing that confused me, what that mid-30s range is,
Yeah,
I think it makes sense there.
So what's it supposed to mean? Disposal of trash?
That's the
tonnage?
recycling rate, right? When you say mid-30s, that you're talking
the
about.
mid-30s is referring to recycling
Yeah.
rate,
Right, so these numbers
but
here.
Yeah, the
this.
recycling percentages have remained stable, mid-30s range, and that's true, that agrees with this table. It
Let me-
goes from
let me clean
35,
this up.
34, 35,
Yeah, it's just, it
Yeah.
was just a little rewording there. And the other thing, it's sort of on your thing, I don't know if it, you had a note on that, the number in this table.
Yes, and you changed it in one thing, but, and you sent me the new table, so I just have to
It's-
insert
okay,
it
just
into
wanna
the
make
one
sure
we
you
did, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So that's
Is that-
just, I
is that
didn't
something-
insert it, I thought I did, but then I saw that. So some of those are old notes,
Oh, yep.
because I haven't
Yep,
taken
yeah, I
care
see,
of
yeah,
it
I
yet.
noticed that, those are the only things I was
So-
confused over.
You started on page 8, and I'm just wondering if anybody had comments, or should we just go through all yours, or,
Those are all mine except for talking about
oh,
table.
that's it, okay.
Yeah.
Dan,
I had a bunch of
where
more
did-
comments that I mailed to you this
Yeah.
afternoon.
So-
So you're on.
So-
and they're very
should we-
clear.
Should we go over them?
Okay.
Or not? I mean, the major ones were, let's see, at the end of executive summary, you list the 4 recommendations that look good. Pay as you throw, these are kind of in order, pay as you throw, composting, page 2 at the bottom.
Yeah.
Pay as you throw,
Yeah, the 4 bullets.
composting,
Yep.
robust public outreach, on-site monitoring of the transfer station.
Mhm.
I would probably add, I'm comparing that to what you have like on page 14, where the section on effective municipal solid waste reduction strategies on page 14. So those 4 items should mimic what's in this section. This section will should elaborate on those 4, and it pretty much does, except for things are a little bit out of order.
Okay, so pay as you throw.
We may wanna, you mentioned about the grant, getting grant money.
Okay, well, I just wanna make sure I've got this. Oh, I see, so the grant money, applying for the grant is stuck in there, but it's not in that first. And
I
that, does that
would
really
add that.
belong there?
I mean, I could add that as, in the executive summary, as another bullet, a 5th bullet of something we wanna accomplish. Right, because you'd be getting a significant amount of grant money that could be used for different things.
It's not a lot of money. I see the grant as a way of doing these other things, of supporting these other things. So it's, what do you call it, it's not a tactic or a strategy, but it's, it's a,
But it's an approach. Well,
it's
well,
not
however
an
you wanna do
approach,
it.
it's something we could do
Yeah,
to mitigate
yeah.
costs and take advantage of a state program. I don't see it as a recommendation per se. It flows as it's available. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think my feeling is the report should be kind of very streamlined, and talking about, grants and recycling points and all this stuff, to me, kind of muddies the whole thing. In other words, it's good, that's kind of detail at the level of this committee, I would think, where, and that for the Board of Selectmen, you kind of want to say, here's the things that we want to change, and we can't do this by ourselves, we need to have support of all these
Right.
boards, But applying for a grant, I mean,
That is like a,
Right.
nobody's gonna stop the recycling committee from doing, you don't have to go to the Board of Selectmen and say,
Right.
can we apply for this grant?
Right.
Maybe on some of these grants you need to get their signature, but I think,
well, for
Right.
sure.
but you go to Tim and say, and then he says, and
Right.
I can't imagine
He
they would say.
submits it.
Yeah,
I
if
write
we-
it,
yeah.
he submits
If
it.
he
If
submits
we
it.
weren't even putting this report together, we could apply for that grant.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think the report should focus on, okay, this is what we wanna change. And, we wanna do pay as you throw, we wanna, compact, we wanna commingle
right,
stuff, we
right.
want to, we wanna, charge for these items, we wanna charge this much money, and this is how much revenue, this is the change in revenue kind of thing. And the grants have been there in the past, they're gonna be there in the
Right.
future, and they're not huge, so it's not like,
Exactly.
it's sort of almost like noise. Because if you do throw in grants, actually, in some sense, like finance type people are gonna say, oh, well, you're gonna do this with grants, and what happens next year when you don't get the grant?
Well, right.
Right,
Is
and
there-
so if we don't talk, I think if you don't talk about grants,
don't emphasize.
you're kind of better off
Well,
almost.
so this is my problem, Claude.
Mm.
Okay, so I agree with everything you just said. We don't even have to include that in there, but we got it in our pocket if somebody says, well, where's the money gonna come from? Well, so that's what you've tried to show, where the money's gonna come from through doing the pay-as-you-throw. And we have some approaches that will make it easier for people to use fewer bags, but still, make it not as heinous to them because they have to pay for a bag now. But we need to be able to answer those questions, but the grant is such a piddling amount of money, really, in the grand scheme of things, so
Right.
maybe it's not that relevant.
Yeah, I think it kind of says, oh, well, this is like a one, even with the streetlights, when we got the streetlights,
Oh,
it's like,
God.
oh, but yeah, we get the free streetlights, but now that we're responsible for fixing them and so on and so forth, so the grant is almost kind of, has that downside, right?
Yeah, so
Um,
this, yeah,
so-
right, so we know that we can apply for this grant to fund something, to help with some piece of this, like, I'm
Maybe
hoping.
Like in
the
FinCom discussion, you could bring that up, if they start really getting into nitty-gritty numbers,
But I think the question they're gonna want, and certainly the residents in the town are gonna wanna know, is, well, what are you estimating it's gonna cost the average resident in town?
well, I think it
Depends on how you
It
behave.
depends on your behavior, which is the whole point of the program, right?
Yeah.
If it didn't depend on what you did, then, so we can't sell it and say, no matter what you do,
But a
it's gonna
family
cost
of-
you less money.
A family with 3 kids is
Mhm.
gonna be very different from my husband and myself,
Right.
Right.
okay? So what do we expect there for those families?
So
Well, I think we have to have, that's a good point. We should probably include like,
Absolutely.
use cases, as they
Right.
call them, and,
Yeah.
and say, okay,
costs
a two-person household, right, and, no pets. I don't know if and then you say, okay, well, actually, it'll be 0, if a two-person household composting,
Yeah. Pretty
and
much,
recycling
right.
the way,
It'll
the
cost
average
them
Carlisle resident recycles,
Right,
0. Somebody who doesn't do any recycling, well, no, they'll be forced to do recycling. Well, not really. I guess
Not
you could put
really.
it all in
Put it
the
all
trash
in the
bag.
trash bin.
It's considered, is that illegal?
it is
Yeah.
banned, there is
It's
mass general law, so
Mass general
yes.
law, okay.
But what's the point of a law if nobody enforces it? That's a different issue.
Right. Well, we could say, as long as you follow the law. No, we don't have to use the word of, recycling. You just say, what's the right, law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
Who don't compost, and then we could give a number for that and talk a couple that does or doesn't compost, and then maybe a family of 3 or 4, maybe 3 and 4, and that'll cover, I think, most of the population in town, right?
The McDonald's had 4 kids.
Right, but that's exceptional.
I know. The
And they'll
outliers.
be able to extrapolate, they'll-
Are you gonna just take that out completely?
The grant thing?
Yeah.
I would think we wanna mention it, maybe put it in an appendix.
Yeah, I think an
Something
appendix
Good,
would-
good thing that we're working on.
but I don't know that it needs to be in the main flow. I think the
Yeah.
main flow should funnel you down this path of, okay, we have a landfill issue, they're closing, Carlisle ranks 5th in solid waste, we need to do our share, not by saying that, but just,
So just.
and then talk about, okay, what's the proven solution? How do you get to that point where we are actually
Okay.
doing our reduction, pay as you throw, and then boom.
And Helen, just so you know, there was a study that was released from New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire, just a few weeks ago, and it was a study of pay-as-you-throw at least in New Hampshire, and consistently they found, and I can send you the link to
That'd be
that study if you'd like, they found reductions in the solid waste tonnage. I don't know if they go into where the stuff goes, is it just covered through recycling or whatever, but.
Well, what we don't want is people dumping stuff in the woods.
Oh, no.
Well, that
not
actually
kidding,
is
I'm
one
not
of the,
joking.
no,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know you're not, particularly in a town like Carlisle.
Cause it happens now.
Yeah, but, well, they found one person, remember, there were bags of trash and the police actually
No.
went through them, this
Oh,
was a
geez.
couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they discovered who it was, and so that person got fined, but, they're not gonna do that over and over again. I mean, I have friends who were pushing for pay-as-you-throw programs in their communities, and some lovely citizens would come by and dump their trash on their lawn. So that happens, okay? There are individuals who behave that way, but bottom line, we can speak to pride of community, and we pride ourselves on X, Y, Z. So there can be a little bit of that, but usually it's initial, and then people get into it, they see it's not so horrible, or it's so expensive, or what have you, and that problem is, it's something people are fearful of, but
It
there's
seems
no
to come
real
up, but
evidence.
what I've read is that it actually doesn't happen to any greater extent.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's a little minor thing, that's out there,
Probably
to a
more
s-
people say, oh, I got a dumpster behind my office building at work, and I take some trash and throw it in there.
Right, and I'm sure that some of that happens as well.
I know what happens with that dumpster at our place.
Oh, at your
Where
place
you
of
work.
work?
Shows up, yeah.
Yeah,
You,
I'm just trying to get this, the 4 bullets in the executive summary, I'm trying to get that to match the sections on page 14 where we elaborate. We should take each of those bullets and elaborate on them, and pay as you throw is fine, it's the first one.
and if we move the,
If you take
the
the
grant to
grant
the
out
appendix,
to an appendix,
then we go into organics
then you're right into
diversion.
organics diversion, which is composting.
Right, so I should use the same language.
I'd use the same language that you use here. Here you call it composting, backyarding, and so we call it organics diversion / composting or something. And then, then you talk about that, that's fine. Then we need something on
Robust public outreach.
robust public outreach campaign. That's an important thing that we do and we want to continue to do. It's publicizing our activities and any changes that we make in the recycling activities, which is basically informing the public either through mosquito articles or our website or
Right, social media.
social media, if we're on, we're not really on social media, but that'd be a good outlet. Maybe we should have a Facebook page.
So I'm just wondering now if that even belongs in
We
here.
don't-
I mean, we're
it's-
talking about the big strategies,
we don't
right,
really
that
discuss,
pay as you throw,
that anywhere.
and
that's not really discussed anywhere later on.
even the on-site monitoring. I mean, those are features that would have to be in place, right? I mean,
Yeah.
should those stay in there as recommendations?
Oh, I think that's a.
Well,
they're
the
crucial to have in there.
initial on-site monitoring, I think, these other communities, they always talked about having, and it's funny, in Littleton, they said that it was well announced that it was gonna go to pay as you throw.
Right,
And,
same narrative.
there was a big lead up to it, and apparently, and there was an enormous amount of activity at the transfer station leading
Before.
up to pay as you throw, right? Because everybody's trying to get rid of all the stuff that,
Right. So
and they were just
everybody
like slammed with stuff. And then they said, okay, the first day, they're like 6 of them all standing there, and like only
Nobody.
one person shows up, right? One person
had all
shows
gone
up,
the day
and the
before.
person goes, what? It's like they're all like staring at her or whatever. She's like, what are they doing?
That's
So there was like
Right.
nobody showed up the first day, right?
They all went the day
and then
before.
2 or 3 days later, it started
Normal flow.
normal
Right.
flow.
Right.
So
So
anyway,
what can we do about
but
it?
that's a feature of these programs is that you do some additional staffing up front, and I think we should definitely allude to that because people
Well,
are going to
but
wonder, well, how is this going to work? If
Yeah, but it's not the same level as pay as you throw. Do you see what I'm saying?
oh
Or do you think it is? See,
yeah,
see,
well,
it's
so
down
pay as you
here
throw
as
is
a rec-
comprehensive. You just put it in there. Yes.
Yeah. okay, that's how, in other words, the on-site monitoring is part of the pay as you throw program, and that actually, the grant money, that's one of the best uses of that grant money.
And
is
that
to
I think
pay for
works
an extra-
because then
right.
it's like a one-time thing. Okay, we
Right.
got a one-time grant that's going to cover it. That works well
Right.
because and you say, look, the experience has been in other communities that you do that once. It's not something you have to do every year,
Right, and that
so
came up yesterday in the
right,
conversation.
that came up.
It doesn't
Yeah,
go
so I
on
think
forever and ever. It
that can work well.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I agree, if you have pay as you throw, you need more on-site monitoring, but even if
Initially.
we don't have pay as you throw, we wanna recommend more on-site monitoring. We need to check transfer station stickers, which we're not doing now. We wanna probably also have the attendants be more vigilant in making sure people are throwing the proper things in the recycling areas, like they're not putting plastic bags in with the plastics and things. So we
so,
wanna make that as a recommendation, separate from pay as you throw.
well, this is the problem with that, I think. Okay, or just that we're looking for a paradigm shift here. This is like a major overhaul, the pay as you throw. That is the one thing that the research shows is absolutely what will get us down in terms of our municipal solid waste. Everything else is a feature of trying to enact that. if you're suggesting that we have to write this report as if we're not gonna get pay-as-you-throw, which may be, but the purpose of this report, and then we can go back to, we gotta do this anyway, but the purpose of this report is to say, what did we find? And what is the real problem, and what can we do to fix this problem? If we start hedging by saying, well, you know, we can also do this stuff, I think then people start to think, this is new thinking on my part, by the way. That people start to think, well, you know, let's give, like I even thought about the composting part. People will say, well, gosh, if you can get 25-30%, forget pay-as-you-throw, let's just do the compost.
Yeah, but nobody's gonna do composting if there's no incentive.
Well,
That's
I
not
know.
true.
That's
It's
true.
true.
Okay, I don't wanna say
I
nobody,
don't
but
think
somebody,
that-
some people will. But I would imagine that it's much more effective if you have pay-as-you-throw.
Well, it certainly is a carrot for people who are in pay-as-you-throw, right, because it can substantially reduce your thing. But I think there are people, we've gotten questions, well, why can't we do townwide composting? They wanted like a composting site, which is not practical, but now, thank goodness, these companies have, you know, emerged because they see an opportunity, because the state is moving towards organics diversion. So there's a business here, and they can sell it. So I guess that's the thing. I don't want to in any way suggest that we're not going to get pay-as-you-throw. Maybe that's the end result. That's the decision that is made. But bottom line, I think, you know, the on-site monitoring goes with that pay-as-you-throw program.
Well, we can still have composting, we can hire Black Earth Composting to come, and I
Yes.
think we should, even without pay-as-you-throw. Is that something we can do next month?
We could do as a pilot. Well, I think we would need a couple of months to build
Well,
up the
I mean,
public.
a couple
Right.
months, but pay-as-you-throw
Right.
is a longer term
That-
process.
Right, because that would,
So
that-
I think we wanna, pay-as-you-throw is one thing we can recommend, but we also have other recommendations as well of things that we can do to improve the transfer station without implementing pay-as-you-throw. Pay-as-you-throw is just one way to approach the problem, and it's the best, I would think. But if we don't achieve pay-as-you-throw, or before we achieve it,
well,
there
how
are these
about,
other steps that we can do as well.
well, we have to have the on-site monitoring period, right? That's just something.
Well, I'm looking at the numbers, financially speaking. Carlisle's at a disadvantage. You know, I came to this conclusion being on the Board of Selectmen because we're a small town, and there's economies of scale with being a larger town, right? You can't have a half a policeman, you can't have a half a firefighter,
Or a quarter of a monitor.
a quarter of a monitor, that kind of thing. And so
But
Littleton
Rich,
has
you
2
can't.
people at the transfer station. Acton has 3.
But you can do part-time people. You can do part-time police force, you can do part-time, you can.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess I was being a little disingenuous with the half a person. Yes, you can do part-time, but in some cases it's difficult because, you know, people want a full-time job, and
Well,
if you need a
right.
certain level of experience,
Right.
you know, like the Board of Health is having trouble, for instance, finding people. But what I'm saying is that if you have a higher volume of activity at a transfer station, you know, you have a bigger town to support, you have 3 people. One person can be just sitting at the gate and selling the tickets and, you know, doing this, and a couple other people can be roving and, you know, looking at what's going on in recycling. Another person could be running the front loader to move the blue bags into the dumpster, you know. That's what I observed in Acton. In Littleton, they have 2 people, but they don't do any hauling. They don't move dumpsters. They
It's
don't
all
have any.
pickup.
They don't have any of their own trucks, so they're hiring somebody else to come in. I think we're half the size of Littleton, and I think Acton is larger than Littleton.
Acton's big.
Acton's big, right? It's like 29,000. We're like 5,000. Littleton, I think, is like 12,000. So, you know, it's 2 doublings. You go up, and that's their advantage. Instead of having 4 people, they have 3. So they have fewer people per person, but they have more kind of flexibility and power at their transfer station than we do. So I think it's going to be very hard if you do the numbers in terms of, you know, how much a transfer station costs. If you throw in 2 people in the transfer station, it's just going to break the budget. So what we have to count on is that we do, our advantage is that we have a smaller transfer station. And if we do single stream, well, the commingling,
commingling.
shall we call it, we do paper, still separate, then, and we do the pay-as-you-throw, it all kind of works together, because now we can get away with using the 3 dumpsters, 1 for garbage, 1 for cardboard, and 1 for the commingled stuff. And then you can put an observation booth where somebody can sit with their credit card thing and collect, you know, the tickets, sell the dump stickers, and have an eye on the 3 dumpsters so they can see what's going in them.
Right, so in those other facilities, Littleton and Acton, the people who are at the transfer station are like our DPW guys. They work full-time jobs, right? They're just dedicated, they dedicate those staff. I'm pretty sure they do that in Acton too. I don't think those
Well, they're
guys
not
do
open.
they're only open 3 days a week.
Right, so I gotta imagine, but there's activities that happen when they're not open, like they
Well,
have to
same.
do driving, they
Right.
have to, you know, clean things up, I'd
Right.
imagine,
Right.
you
But I
know.
think our DPW guys are available for all the various highway department things. They don't just do.
Yeah, no, I don't think that, yeah,
Right,
it's,
so, okay.
yeah, it's
So-
it's a shared resource, it's
Right.
not a single individual, but
Right.
it's 27 hours a week that they're open, and then there's probably, they do clean things up, and I don't know that they're doing that always while it's open.
And
So
they
they're-
do hauling on the off days.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they do
hauling
hauling
is
and
enough.
things like that, and there's probably sometimes 2 people there on a Saturday, I think somebody's
Absolutely.
moving the
Yeah.
dumpsters around, and I don't think that's always the person who's sort of monitoring, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
But, so, yeah, I see the whole thing as a package. I don't think it's kind of, I don't know that it should be presented as an à la carte thing, because I don't think it can work. Even the composting, financially, you have to pay for the Black Earth people. So you wanna have something, if we go to the finance committee and say, well, you know, the school wants 5% increase and da-da-da-da-da, and we want another % increase on the transfer station because of,
do we really, I don't think we really need it actually, and
no, if we do it as comprehensively, but if we say all we're gonna do is the Black Earth composting,
forget it.
that's more money, right? And, you know, and now we're presenting them with an increase.
So the
What we
Black-
wanna do is deliver and say, look, we wanna reduce, we're asking for we're asking for an increase in the budget of negative $100,000.
Right, right.
That's what we wanna go in front of them with and say,
Fine.
can
So-
we have that, please?
So the Black Earth does not require a monitor from the transfer station. In Acton, they have 7 bins lined up. The guy from Black Earth comes in with this really nifty little truck that has a little forklift and it picks up the thing and they change the bags. Black Earth does all of that. So there's no oversight for that. There just has to be a spot where the truck can get in to pick up the containers. So that's a pretty, you know, that's a
And it's
self-contained.
gonna save us money because it diverts all the trash. The composter would otherwise go into the trash into
Right.
these composting bins.
Well, normally, you know, you start off with, not everybody gets gloms on right away, right? So they went from, in Acton,
Well,
they
yeah,
started
we'd
with
have to
3 bins,
Ramp up.
and within 3 months, they were up to 7 bins,
Yeah.
twice a week. Okay, so that's 14 bins load, 64-gallon bins, totes they call them, a week, that get processed through Black Earth. We're thinking, let's start with 2 totes, and then it'd be ideal to get twice a week. But anyway, these are the, you know, we can work all that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that we will have 2 people on board, if we get that grant to do some of the
Initially.
monitoring.
Yeah.
Because probably 8 weeks worth of someone, but that would have to be an additional staff. That would have to be somebody we'd hire from outside, because I don't think our DPW guys have the capacity to.
Well, the other
to
thing
throw
that we
the
could
person.
ask Gary is, when do we start pay-as-you-throw, right? There might be a time of year where the DPW is not as busy. Right.
Winter is not a good time.
Right, exactly, that's what I was thinking, that the middle of snow
You're
plowing
rolling
season is
out,
not,
right?
you know, you don't wanna have to be monitoring people when
Right.
it's freezing cold outside and all that kind of stuff. So, I think strategically, one would wanna pick a date where, and consult with Gary and say, you know, what would be the sort of least stressful time for your 8-week period for where,
Right.
you know, your staff, there might be more flexibility.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, that is, you know, definitely, and then I think that it's really important that we concentrate the the areas that need supervision, which is basically gonna be the garbage, cardboard, and then the bulk of the recycling, in that very small area, so you can have one person monitoring all of it.
Right.
And then the newspaper and I think the mixed paper, I don't think that needs much monitoring. I think
No.
people get it.
Yeah,
I don't see plastic bags going in there. I don't, and
well,
I don't see staff, DPW staff, having to tell people, explain it or whatever.
well,
It's I think more around the plastic, tin, aluminum, and glass. But if that was all concentrated at the compactor in this one area, that would then make it possible for one person reasonably to be able to control and monitor the situation.
right, and then the heavy day is Saturday, and they have two guys there on Saturday.
Okay.
They have for a long, right, I mean, I've seen.
Oh, I wasn't aware of
every
that.
Saturday
Okay,
I see
okay.
two guys there. So, because they do know, and they have to move the stuff in the.
Yeah, I got that
container.
sense, right,
Yeah.
that often I see a dumpster moving, but there's still somebody else.
But even
there.
just pushing like the plastics down
Right.
to make room, cause a lot
Right.
of times there's room in the, so I've seen them. in
But
there
that
in the
will, if you have a dumpster doing that,
Compacting.
then that's kind of,
Right. So the thing you'd wanna avoid in that commingling, because the source separated stuff is the cleanest by far. Okay, you may have some contamination issues, but not like a lot of communities where single stream is a mess, it really is in that regard, so, but we're not talking about, we're talking about still a reduced commingling, we're not throwing everything in.
yeah, I mean, I would.
It's
but
not single stream.
It's not, yeah, completely single stream,
Right.
so, but I think, so the proposal that I saw that was written up for the, grant and saying, okay, we're gonna put this and this, I think that should be in the report as part of the package of what's being proposed for the transfer
Do
station.
you have that? Because you said you saw it, I don't.
Yeah, I have an email,
Okay.
yeah, I'll find it, I'll send everybody a
Yeah,
copy.
send us that. So let's get back and try to resolve this, cause it's almost 9:00. So,
In
Dan,
terms of,
you think we should absolutely keep robust public outreach campaign?
yeah, that's a recommendation of something that we can do, that is an ongoing thing that we're already doing. But, depending as new programs pop up, whether it's pay as you throw, whether it's getting placard composting, we're gonna need to inform the public of what we're doing.
Well, that's actually, that's a major public outreach effort, so we haven't really done a major public outreach effort. And, this is, we have when we've been selling compost bins,
Yeah.
we've done a good job, for something special like that. So this is kind of equivalent, but like multiplied, because it's a much more, complex,
You pay as you throw,
yeah.
yeah.
And even the composting, that's gotta be really clear.
Right.
And then the on-site monitoring, I guess I'm just nervous about that, because I think Gary's gonna see that. And he's gonna interpret that as, his guys being attacked.
Well, that's his job. I think we have to push him on that, because we've been talking about this for
Yeah.
a decade.
Well, I
We
think
need
residents
somebody
would like to see
at
this.
and residents
Right,
have
and
been
we keep
talking
hearing
this.
it from people.
Yeah,
We need to have the transfer somebody at the transfer station monitoring the transfer station stickers, because we don't know how big the problem is. There are people I know there are people from outside, from Chelmsford, that come in and use the transfer station. We don't know how big the problem is. It could be huge. It could be a huge problem. We'd like to get a handle on that, and that's something we can do tomorrow. We just tell Jerry, or tell the police, or get the board of selectmen to say, do it, and it should be done.
No,
I've
they-
tried to get it done,
As
Me too.
being on the board of
yeah,
selectmen.
yeah, and there was, what I proposed was, and I have a camera,
I know you were proposing a picture of the license plate.
Yes, and I have a system, and I was actually working on it a little bit today. But I did bring it up, and I remember Nathan Brown was like, oh, privacy, concerns, right? What I would say is, look, we're only gonna capture the license plates, we're not even gonna really capture the time that they're there. We're not gonna publish that information. We just wanna have a list of all the unique license plate numbers that, over a certain period of time, wanna compare that to the list of the dump stickers, period. And then we wanna know percentage are actually on the list versus that are not.
Right.
Um,
I'm monitoring too.
Yeah.
So
so I'd like,
here's a low-tech idea that we've talked about a gazillion times. You set a deadline. I think January personally is a stupid deadline. Even Gary has said that because, you know, your new stickers due in January. It's the middle of the winter and it's cold and the things don't adhere properly, according to Gary, to your vehicles and stuff. I propose that we come up with a more sensible deadline that, you know, we advertise, and then we really advertise the heck out of that and say, you know, new rules in town. We're really serious, you know, you will not be allowed into the transfer station if you do not exhibit, you know, show a sticker, period. And then
but I talked to the guy who's there, you know,
Yeah.
at least he's on the weekdays. I don't know that he's one of the weekend people. But he's like, oh no, I keep track of it, and I know the people, and so on and so forth. He was adamant that there was no leakage. You know, there might be one or two people, or you know, but so they are very reluctant to kind of
well, here's
enforce it,
the
you know.
other piece. Yes, they are, okay. The problem is that people in town, like you, Dan, you said, you know that there are hundreds, thousands of
I don't
people
know,
coming from
hundreds,
Chelmsford. But you know,
I've
there is a
seen it.
suspicion out there that's
No, there's
huge.
definitely there's a
I've seen it
suspicion.
happen.
There's a lot of people.
And we've gotta have a system where people feel that, you know, it's being taken
enforced.
care of. And
Yeah.
wouldn't it be wonderful
But
if
that's what pay as you throw. I think that's the other reason we have to go as pay as you throw, because then it's so clear, right? There's even peer pressure, right? If you show up and you don't have the purple bag and you're throwing, you know, it's like,
and you
so
think the guys,
I'm, you know, who, are you special? You know, do you get to use the black bag? You know, there's peer pressure because it's very obvious, right?
there's still gonna be an enforcement issue. If somebody comes in and just blows it off and says, no thanks, I'm not doing this, I'm throwing this bag in here, I'm not gonna go along with this program, somebody still has to enforce that.
Right, but I think it's easier at that point because you'll have other citizens will see it happening, and then they can either, you know, report the license plate to the police, or the transfer station person, I think, will be forced to confront that person. And you know, I think it's so much easier, because with the dump sticker, it's like, well, I had it, but you know, this, or you know, it's on my other car, this is a rental, this is a loaner, there's so many ways to sort of obfuscate what it is that you're doing. If you don't have the plastic bag, you say, look, we're selling the bags right here. You know, and you have to use one of the bags. Here they are, pay me the money, and you have the
You can
bags.
put your bag in this bag.
Well, right.
Right, you put, right.
So,
In Acton, what they do is they will collect a fee for the bag, and they tell the person, look, they discourage it, right? They do it just initially, and they say, look, you better buy
it's
the
like
bags.
a one-time pass, basically.
Yeah, one-time pass. But if you keep doing this, you know, you keep coming in, oh, I forgot, you know.
Well,
no.
they have to know who you are, and they have to
You
have
keep
some
doing it, they'll
way
know
of
who you
tracking.
are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which-
maybe the rule is they force you to buy the bags with an extra $2, so you get 10 bags for $22, or whatever. Yeah, $22, and then you you get to throw that one bag in for free, and then here's your other 10 bags, and you better show up with your stuff in these bags next time, kind of thing.
You better do it.
But I think that's just so much easier than, you know, the dump sticker, I think, because the problem is that if we have somebody, since we're a one-person operation in Carlisle, staffing-wise, because Carlisle doesn't have the money to have a bigger staff,
Right.
it's hard to have the one person looking at the dumpsters and also checking. Like in Littleton, they're actually behind the dumpster, so I was able to drive in without a problem and park
Not
right
in
next to the
Acton.
little.
They have a gate in Acton.
In that case, I did drive by. I don't know how I got,
Are
and
you
they didn't
kidding?
stop me.
Oh, boy, I was stopped.
Oh, you were? Okay. So maybe Joe was looking down or he was on the phone or whatever, and it wasn't able to come out and say something. But in Littleton, there's nobody at the gate. You can get in, and the dumpsters are first, and then the guys are sort of behind the dumpsters, but they have a view of the whole thing. So my point is just that it's difficult to arrange things in such a way that one person can
Right.
look at 3 dumpsters and also look at the gate and make sure that, you know, they're coming in.
So if we do the commingling in one of the compactors, if we reduce the solid waste stuff to the level where we only need one compactor, which would be wonderful, then that's less monitoring, right?
Yeah,
Because
that-
that's one compactor, so right away, the job is easier. How to do that and the transfer station sticker fees, I still feel that we talked about hiring the police, because the police won't do it for free, it's like off-duty work.
Well, so
Overtime.
I've been pushing for the notion of, and you asked about this too, can we get a situation, and I talked to Chief Fisher about this, can we get the Board of Selectmen to decree that it's basically trespassing if you go to the transfer station without a sticker? And then, because when I talked with John Fisher, he talks about standing. You know, you, as a police officer, you have to be able to, there has to be something that you're enforcing. You can't just say, well, you know, I think you shouldn't be here,
You're a
you know,
bad
or
boy.
whatever. It has to be very specific. So if we can, and I want to ask town council about this, if we can make it a trespassing offense, because then the police do have standing and can come and say, look, you're trespassing on, you know, town of Carlisle property because you don't have a dump sticker.
But you would have to be, they'd have to be called.
Yes,
They're
but
not
I
gonna
think
be
that's
wrong.
not gonna happen that often. I
I
think,
don't think so.
I think basically, you know, initially maybe once a week tops, and then maybe once a month or every 2 or 3 months, you're gonna have somebody. And my feeling is that if the DPW staff says, look, you know, you're not supposed to be here, they don't leave, they, you know, they start pushing back. He says, well, I'm gonna call, you know, the Carlisle officer, and he'll come and explain to you you know, he's an expert on the rules here, and he'll explain it to you, or
That
she'll
is-
explain it to you. Then I think most times that person's gonna leave to say, okay, thank you very much, and then they're gonna leave. The rare individual will stay there, and then they'll have a conversation with the police, and, you know,
Well, and again.
that's what they're trained to do, the
Yeah.
police, right? You know.
Well, that sounds great, if we could do that. That's what we.
Well,
yeah.
I think part of what we should do is get the DPW staff and the police, you know, together and I think we have to outreach to the DPW staff and say, and acknowledge their concerns about the belligerent people who currently give them a hard time because they don't have a dump sticker and they don't think they should need one. And their fears about it getting worse under pay as you throw, and say, okay, look, you know,
Well, we also have the experience of Littleton, where those DPW folks were convinced it was gonna be a nightmare, and they discovered that it wasn't. There was initial, you know, pushback,
yeah.
but then it really calmed down, and now they're happy with it, I believe you said?
Well, I mean, they say that it still happens, you know, that there are
Right.
people who, right now, they're actually moving to compacting plastics. So
Oh.
that the place where you put the plastics moved from, you know, just what we have, where you just sort of throw it in the top to a dumpster, a compactor, and so they have to go out there and tell people, and there are people who still give them a hard time. But
Right.
what I'd like to do is really connect the DPW staff with the police
That
and
would be wonderful.
and make sure they understand that they do have somebody who's got their back, where
If-
they have backup. It's not all on them. yeah.
If council says that we can make this a trespassing violation.
Yeah, and I'd like to.
Does
So I
that-
asked Tim whether I could ask town council, and Tim said, "Well, that's something that the board of selectmen should do." So I want to ask. I was hoping Alan Lewis would be here because
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to him tomorrow and try to get him to make that request of town council.
Sure,
You know,
yeah, that's good.
and then we can get a reading on that.
And if they say no, then it's back to the drawing board, but there's gotta be a solution. I mean, I know that it's done in other towns. They figured it out in other
Yeah.
towns.
They enforce the stickers.
Yeah,
I had some questions on the table.
which one?
The big one.
You mean the money one? That's Claude's.
I think it's page 14 in there. It's the pages, no table.
Yeah, with the recommended
yeah.
First
fee
I
schedule.
had
Did you get this, Helen? Did you get this?
I have.
what looks,
Yeah, an electronic version.
on the
I don't know if
second,
it's
the second table, the financial
second.
impact
Oh, down below,
of property taxes.
yeah.
He has pay as you throw with 25% solid waste reduction. What are those numbers supposed to be?
Claude?
Property tax reduction?
Oh,
Yeah, that line item.
So,
for the
what,
transfer station.
You're saying it'll go down 181,000?
let me see the table.
This is really,
Yes,
this
yes.
is still.
And then with
bad
pay 44%, and then with 50%? So as the solid waste goes down,
You get less benefit.
That,
I mean, that's
can you
the
explain that to me again? Because
Well,
you
that's
did,
the
and I said,
paradox.
oh, and then I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So,
Well, the paradox of, let's say a carbon tax is, let's say you want to reduce fuel consumption,
Mhm.
right? Consumption of gasoline. So, and let's say you say, okay, this is a great new way to tax people. Let's, instead of income tax, we're gonna, tax what you burn, not tax what you earn, right? The problem is that if it's effective, you're gonna reduce the
Oh.
amount of gasoline that's
Okay.
used. And so if the tax per gallon of gasoline stays the same,
right,
eventually nobody's burning gas and you have no more tax revenue. Mission accomplished, except you've lost a source of revenue. Same thing is happening here.
If the
If
trash
we
goes-
get to zero waste, we're not gonna have any bag revenue
Right.
at all.
right.
And what you're seeing there is that as we get better, 30 to 44 to
Lower
50,
tonnage,
less
few bags,
Fewer
fewer
bags.
bags. Right,
and less revenue.
right. So, how did you get those figures? Did that come from that model?
Well,
From-
that's a spreadsheet, yeah,
The one
that,
from
from the
Julia.
state.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's basically all it does is it says, okay, if each bag weighs this much on average, right? So,
Right.
Right,
if we reduce our solid waste, then we have this many bags, or, you take the total tonnage, you divide by the
right,
weight per bag, you say this is the number of bags times whatever you're charging for the bags minus what the bags cost, 30 cents, blah, 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 and then there's your, but it also figures in the reduced tipping fees.
right,
okay,
The reduced tipping fees, but the increased, well, it depends on whether you're making money on recycling or not, so
right.
it tries to model all of that
And
and
that's-
come up with a
that's-
number.
Right, and that's an unknown. I mean,
Okay.
already Julia Green was saying that a lot of communities are already getting less money for the recycling.
Yeah, so all of this is,
It's very,
there's no way you can predict the future, right? I
right,
mean, this is all about forecasting it.
Right.
A lot of
Just
different
that-
things.
except
that's
that,
gonna be a hard line to explain, that's all.
oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
That it goes down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I
if it was
think that
100%
Well-
solid waste reduction, we'd have.
Right, I mean, it's not obvious from
zero
looking at it,
reduction.
it's not obvious from just looking at it, what's going on there.
right.
You know, it's-
I guess if we had zero solid waste, there might still be a reduction because the tipping fees would go to zero and the
Well,
trucking costs would go
right.
to zero.
you're talking about revenue from bags in this particular table, or is it everything? It doesn't
No,
include
it
the-
includes everything.
Okay,
It's a combination of all the different
Right.
things.
So
Just
maybe,
another-
maybe just some sentence there that,
Well,
just
could
the
we get,
combination of all, all these factors, excellent.
right.
it-
Well, we could eliminate the columns. I mean, just have two columns, status quo and, 44% reduction, let's say, for instance. And then,
Yeah,
and then we just avoid that whole, we don't have to explain it. I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, we're saving money if we do pay as you throw. I mean, maybe that's better because in a sense, I think, I've been saying this, if you throw too much detail in, you start to, all these
It
questions
gets-
come up and then you have to
Right.
start explaining all these little
Right.
details and then that gets people thinking about, oh, well, what about this and what about that? And then you're off in the weeds and
right,
you've
'cause
lost
I
them.
couldn't, just looking at it, I had no clue how that was going down.
Yeah, that's a little
Right.
confusing
it's
to
not
me.
intuitive.
Right. Well,
So-
when I first saw it, I said, wait a minute. I was expecting it to go up, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's because the bag revenue is going down.
Right,
So, user fee per household, okay? So, this is based on how many bags you would expect people to purchase? So there is something there around average.
Yes, that's an overall average, but
Right.
that, some people are gonna be paying less, some people are gonna be paying more,
Right,
depending on their behavior.
Right, that's interesting to me.
Um,
and so all the numbers in this table, did that come from, is that based on like similar to another town? All these
No, this is a
prices?
model from the state.
All these prices?
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I didn't,
All these-
Oh,
all
that's
these
based on
prices?
Littleton.
This is Littleton.
This is Littleton, okay.
I just
That's
copied
what-
what Littleton did.
Okay,
I said,
I was curious where, where
yeah,
the.
that's the Littleton fee schedule, and their fee schedule, at least bag-wise, is higher than Acton. You know, what's interesting is I was thinking that Acton was not an enterprise fund, it wasn't a self-funded transfer
Right.
station, and Littleton was.
Right.
And I thought, and the reason I thought that was that they're self-funded with only $100 dump stick. No, is it, what is
No,
their dump
I
stick?
think it is 100, but then there are differences, people from out of town who wanna use the station.
Yeah, but I don't think that, yes, that's higher. It's
Right.
at 180 for out-of-towners.
Right,
But I was thinking, look, their prices are lower, so they must not be making up all their costs. But again, I think it must be economies of scale gets them to a point where they can actually charge less. That's the only explanation I can give. And so we're at a big disadvantage because we're half the size of Littleton.
well,
So,
that's hitting us in the face.
Did- is well,
Did you see the email from Corey York from Acton?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
is the intention for that the fees, the bag fees, cover the cost of?
No, what I was
Something
trying, I mean, I wasn't aiming for that. I wasn't trying
Okay.
to make the transfer station self, I'm trying to make it palatable, but still have an incentive to reduce solid waste. And to me, the best way to do that is to say, go with a $0 dump sticker, give away 12 free bags, because if you do that, those 12 free bags are gonna be so precious. People are gonna I really don't wanna have to buy a bag at all. I've got these 12 here, I really wanna make these last all year. And
It's Dolly
and
yesterday.
that, I think,
Okay,
is,
wait a minute here.
So structuring it that way, and it also allows us to say, look, this is actually gonna be less costly out of pocket for you, if.
Right.
So that's my reasoning, but all these numbers could be adjusted. We could say, no, it's
Right.
$2 a bag, or
Right.
$1.50, and no free bags, and, a $10 dump sticker, or a $100 dump sticker like they do in Acton, I don't know.
And at this point,
Wait a minute here.
I don't think we have any reasonable way of estimating how much, you've given a set fee schedule, how much money it would generate. Is there any, is there any
Not from the fees there, that are outside of the pay-as-you-throw
I mean,
bag
we don't
thing.
know, we have no idea how many we sell. I don't think we have any way of even estimating it ahead of time.
Bag-wise, we
Yeah.
do,
Well,
from the notion of, here's how much an average bag weighs, and here's how much solid waste we dispose of.
okay,
So but yeah, microwaves, refrigerators, those kinds of things. Right now, we basically allow people to bring those, and we don't charge for them at all. So that's gonna be, more revenue coming in, which is not accounted for in that spreadsheet. The other thing the spreadsheet doesn't account for is the reduction, if we use a compactor to do, plastics and glass and tin and aluminum, we're gonna have, I just sent an email to everybody about the compactor and the size reduction. So we could have half the number of trips to Billerica, which would mean less fuel,
That's right.
right,
and less driver time, and so on and so forth. So that's something we could add, try to estimate the savings from that.
yeah, and, but even, on the tonnage, we don't know, I mean, the bags are all based on gallons, we don't know how much a bag would weigh.
Well, the state, in the
That's
model, they
We
have,
do have that.
they have a,
Average weight.
yeah, there's
Okay.
And Black Earth said that 64-gallon tote would cover 50 to 60 households. That's a lot of, I mean, they know just from experience,
Right.
what they're getting.
Okay.
Another question.
Sure.
So from the very beginning, we were saying that the decrease that we've seen in places like Littleton was largely for two things. One of them was misuse of the transfer station, people from out of town using it.
This is
And-
our hypothesis.
Hypothesis, right? And you, Lana, were saying that a good portion of it, maybe as much as 20%, could be from organics.
I don't know that Littleton does composting. Do they?
So if we look at us,
Littleton, I don't know.
Acton definitely does, and that's made a big difference for Acton.
so if we look at us, And we were just trying to get us from not be the fifth worst in terms of tonnage of solid waste in the state. If we did just two things, and that's recycled for organics and worked better at the transfer station, so all these people from other towns weren't using the transfer station.
Assuming there are other people, I mean, if.
But that's what we said at the very beginning. I said, where is this stuff going?
Right,
And the answer was, well, mostly it's people not misusing the transfer station, right? 50% drop in Littleton, that stuff went somewhere. It's not like people just stopped using 50%. I mean, think about it at home. How can you cut your waste in half by 50%? That's
I did it with no trouble.
I can guarantee you I could not do that.
Really?
Yes.
You mean current, that's
Yeah,
after,
current.
okay, you're not composting,
I'm not composting.
Right.
Okay, so there's my 20%.
there you go.
Okay, all right, so we do our 20%. Why can't, in Carlisle, why can't we do 20% and then make sure nobody else is using the transfer center
End of story,
and just store it?
doesn't work.
Why not?
Because people will, I think that we have some people who are very diligent. I mean, you see them every week when you go to the transfer station, who are doing what they should be doing in terms of recycling. But there are plenty of people who just come in and throw a giant bag, and there's no reason for them not to.
Okay, so that's not what we said at the beginning of the
No,
night.
but I think that, to me, that I can say I've observed, okay? Now, the other piece that we have not, well, some people say they've observed it, some people haven't. I don't like to say it's all these out-of-towners, because we don't know, because
No, we
we've
don't.
never checked. I wanna check just because I wanna know.
Well,
Is
that
this
makes good
an
sense to
issue?
me.
And I'd like to check,
And-
I'd like
and if
to
it's-
check before we make any of these other
If
changes.
it's not, if it's not an
Right.
issue, end of
Exactly
story.
right. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And
Yeah,
just
I think-
dispel that.
Right, I know, the
Or
problem
deal
is
with it.
there's pushback. I mean, like, here's an example, one of the collectors, the local collectors that we talked about, is an employee of the transfer station, right?
Okay.
Now, that's,
I
to
see.
me, that's somewhat of a conflict of interest,
Of course
right?
it is.
Because if the transfer station employees are supposed to be the ones asking the collectors to present the list of people that they're collecting for, you know, and to make sure that they have a dump sticker, if it's a colleague, or if that's the person who's on duty at the transfer station, because the person who normally does it is on vacation or whatever, that's to me a clear conflict of interest,
I
you know?
sent you that email about, I don't know if you read it or not, about the private hauler and the person who was using this private hauler basically stopped getting a transfer station.
Station sticker. And I talked to one person who is using a private hauler, and they say that they do buy a sticker because they make their own trips sometimes,
Yeah.
even though they're private hauler. So, you know,
That's right,
but
it's a
it's an
squishy,
impossible thing to enforce, because how do you just ask for the list? You know, I said this before, right?
They hand you a
then-
list.
Yeah, here's my list of 3 people, right? So, I think that there's pushback, so the transfer station people, plus they don't want to do pay-as-you-throw because of the whole, thing, and so, right now, they are busy, you know, operating the compactors and so on and so forth, so for them to, you know, look at people coming into the transfer station, so once the people are in, they may have already deposited some stuff, they may be able to confront them at that point, but, they're also sort of been cowed because there's some individuals who are very belligerent, right, and then they, you know,
I'm in
how would you
Canada.
like to have a job where, you know, you're interacting with people and they're yelling at you and screaming at you because they're, you know, angry? So that's why I want to have the police, because
Yeah.
I mean that's sort of what the police do.
Yeah, that's
you know?
what they do. The police.
Yeah, that's their job. It's
That's their
and
job.
and they know how to, you know, stand in front of somebody and intimidate them. Basically,
Yeah, right,
you know?
that's the
That's
badge.
the badge, the hat, the gun, you know,
Yeah.
the nightstick, and you know that. So I feel it's a, you know, and then you have the privacy considerations, right? People say, well, we don't really want to have a camera there. So now, I mean, in some sense, if we all said we're each going to take a day at the transfer station, but I don't want to sit there for a whole day.
you know,
Sitting there
and
capturing
again,
license plates.
there's a part of me knowing that other transfer stations do this, okay?
But they tend to be bigger town. I mean, it's easier in an Acton.
But the point is that they manage, okay? Groton is a smaller system,
Mhm.
and they do it. Just saying, okay? So it kind of grates with regard to having to have civilians out there doing this,
No,
because it requires a more,
Yeah, I
you know,
think, well, I think it's also a status quo situation. It's never been done, and so there's a lot of sort of culture around the fact that we don't check. And so there may be relationships that people have, you know, and you're sort of going in and tweaking a system or trying to change a system that's
Well, this is a
entrenched
culture.
and has evolved and,
like the
and-
swap shed,
yeah, I mean,
is
there's,
a culture.
yeah, that's a culture. Yeah, I think, you know, so because I've been there at the transfer station, I had long conversations with the people staffing it. I've had conversations with Gary, and every place you go, there's a lot of pushback, you know. And I'm not, even as a selectman, I didn't have the authority to really do anything. I'd have to get the whole select board to, and that's, I think, what we really want to do here. We want to have this report kind of land on the selectmen's desk and say, look, this is what we need to do. It's a comprehensive program, and it all has to work together because we can't afford to spend more money on this. But we can actually save a significant amount of money. But we have to do it all together because if we try to staff up and have two people there, you know, or one person dedicated to just checking dump stickers, it's just not going to work because we don't have the money to do that. So we have to, you know, do pay-as-you-throw to reduce the compact, you know, the tonnage that goes into a compactor. We could free up another compactor so we can do that, bring the recycling closer to the monitoring point, you know, and we need to make the monitoring easier where it's related to actually the amount of trash, not whether you have a sticker on your car or not.
And the irony is that I think in a lot of ways this would make the job easier for the people at the transfer station. If we did this in this uniform,
Yeah.
this way, it would be an easier job, it really would be. So you were talking about a transponder situation where there are transfer station stickers with little chips in them that would activate a gate, for example. How
Right.
much does that cost?
How much-
About $3,000?
what kind of
a
investment?
sticker?
It's probably not that expensive. Yeah.
I like that idea personally. That would work, wouldn't it? Cool.
Yeah, you get or maybe we just piggyback on the fast lane or the Easy Pass and
Yeah.
tell people you have to get an Easy Pass, and then
Well,
we're
you
gonna.
can talk to the Boston Marathon. They give runners chips, don't they? Have monitoring stations.
in their
and
shoelaces.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
so they can't cost an arm and a leg because they got several of these things along the route.
Right. Right.
I don't know, but now we're talking.
Right. But I think, I mean, but if we look at the big picture, I think if you do pay as you throw, it's not that important to determine whether or not.
Bags, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
your
mean,
point.
right, because if they have
Yeah.
to buy the bags, you know, how
Oh.
much leakage are we going to have,
Right.
right? I mean, you could say, oh, well, people are going to come and dump their recycling. Seems unlikely, though. If they can't dump their trash, they're going to make a special trip into Carlisle just to.
Well, why would they? I mean, most towns that have a drop off or.
It's free
or
recycling
curbside-
anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
Even if it's curbside, that part's free.
Right.
Well, more or less.
More or
I
less,
guess
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
fee that gets charged.
Yeah. So
But-
I don't think, I don't
So-
think that's the, pay as you throw is a way to bottleneck and measure the exact thing that you're trying to control.
Right, right.
The dump sticker doesn't really do that.
Exactly, and there are just too many difficulties and complexities around really monitoring effectively the transfer station sticker. But with the bag thing, you're still gonna have to have enforcement on the part of the transfer station staff.
Yes,
If
definitely.
they see a purple bag and the
So-
bag choice is clear or green, then they've gotta be able to go to that person and say, sorry, I can't do this. Here's a bag, you can buy it from us here, that kind of thing, they've gotta be willing to do that. And
Right.
that's, some training up, etc. And a conversation, depending on what town council discovers around the trespassing piece or not, as backup if necessary. But there's also a piece of their job that they have to own, which is,
Yeah, no, definitely. They have to make the initial contact.
yeah,
They don't have to follow all the way through.
if somebody's.
If the person is being recalcitrant, I argue that the police should be brought in to, to finish it up. That they shouldn't be they shouldn't have to listen to
Then-
any
right.
screaming or yelling or whatever.
Yeah.
They could say, fine, I'm gonna have to call the police, I'm sorry. And they go back in their little thing, they call the police, and my guess is that person's gonna be gone really quickly.
I'd
Yeah.
say take a photograph of their license plate, that's.
Well, certainly they can write that down as well.
Yeah.
You probably get one of those remote monitors that they sell to people that are, if you fall,
Oh, yeah.
my alarm company's gonna know right away to have that in the police station. Do you want the police here?
Is
I'm
that
gonna press this
first
button.
alert?
Well, a cell phone would work really well too, I think. It could you just text or
Have
speed dial.
preloaded phone number in there.
Yeah, and just make a call,
So, you know, so,
So you
if we don't-
want some sort of either,
well,
this is on your list here.
Oh, well, I think we should maybe get rid of some of those columns, because I think, I was also baffled by the numbers when I first looked at it, and then I started figuring it out. But, the people who are reading this report aren't gonna be spending the amount of time I spent on this
Right.
at all, right? And so, and then we have to explain it, and I think even putting in a note, it opens up a discussion that I don't think
Right.
we really wanna have necessarily.
Right.
Right,
and if it is such a multifaceted, convoluted equation to get to the numbers, then yeah, that would be hard to explain.
Yeah, so maybe we should just go with the 44%. That's the number that the state recommends, or has indicated
is
is
doable,
is
achievable.
the average.
Yeah.
That's what Waste Zero says, 44% reduction.
Yeah.
So we'll go with that.
That's
Now,
our target.
if to implement pay as you throw, then we're envisioning that it would be managed at the transfer station, like selling the bags and how are we
Well,
gonna-
towns, so Acton
question is-
doesn't sell them
I
at
mean-
the transfer station, but they,
Oh.
no, Acton
I
sells them at the
envision-
transfer
Littleton
station,
doesn't.
but they also sell them in stores.
Yeah.
In Littleton, there's like at least a half a dozen stores, somewhere between a half dozen and a dozen stores, including a Market Basket, Donnellan's, hardware store, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then, so I would imagine that we would sell them at the transfer station, and we would sell them at Fern's.
Right, those are the only, seem to me,
Or-
they're the only two possibilities.
Yeah, it seems, I don't see how we could get Market Basket and Billerica to sell them, it
No.
doesn't,
No.
I don't see why they would be.
We don't need to do that either.
Yeah.
We would
And-
just, but even if we just did it at Fern's, because that's a whole nother sort of gearing up at the transfer station side.
Right,
They're not, I don't know, that could be done in the future, maybe not too far distant, but usually stores are happy to sell the bags because it brings more traffic into their store
right,
for other things. So, that obviously is voluntary, the guy, Matt, would have to agree to that, right? So,
right. My sense is that he would be all over that.
Yeah,
But I think we're going to have have some financial transaction capability at the transfer station because of the large ticket items, the bulk items that they talk about.
Right,
you can have that done
And
at
also-
the police station. You
and
do
also-
it, but it's,
how are you gonna give out the stickers and the initial 12 bags to everybody?
Good question. I hadn't really thought about
Those-
how would you,
those
well,
are just some of the
so
questions
the
I thought
police,
would
I guess
might
arise.
well, no, so when you go buy your dump sticker, which presumably would be at the transfer station, you would get a package of 12 bags. Here's your
And your sticker.
sticker and your 12 bags. So there would be some inventory there. And maybe you say you can't buy them here. You can't buy them. You can buy a dump sticker and you'll get your 12 free bags. But outside of that, you have to go buy them at Fern's. And that might be nice for Fern's because it forces some degree of traffic that they might not otherwise have, that kind of thing.
well, we'd have to work that out. I was.
That's a
envisioning-
fine tuning thing. I mean, we could propose,
Because you'd still want just like when you get your sticker now, you still wanna confirm that they're a resident,
right, so they
just
would,
like they do now.
right, so I
Just-
think you'd have to ask them to present the registration of their vehicle, and then you would just check the
Track
registration.
The same way it is now.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward, I think.
But you're saying that would be done at the transfer station?
I think, yeah, because if they have to sell the stickers for the bulky items, then they already have to have a credit card machine, they already have to be able to do transactions. And I think,
Right.
you know,
They'd
the
have to be
people
set
don't
up.
particularly I don't like going to the police station. The dispatch I was talking to this morning, he was
They hate
not
it.
fond of the whole, he'd rather like
Right.
have that be on somebody else.
For sure.
So, you know, once you're doing financial transactions at the transfer station, you might as well do them all.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
just
really see.
financial transactions have never been done. When I got the grant money from the state to buy some compost bins, I had to agree to have them stored at my house.
Because
They don't quote have room at the transfer station.
well, I mean, it's,
Which,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
since I'm giving them out to people, people would come and, you know, I could make it convenient for me as
Mhm.
well as for them.
They might have to build
But-
another shed to store all these bags.
I had 2 pallets of compost bins once. We had ordered something like, I don't know, 60 bins or something,
Right.
sitting in my driveway. But those were pre-ordered, so that was pretty simple. I was able to get rid of them fairly quickly. But this struck me as a little strange, but.
you know, one thing that just occurred to me is that if we give out 12 free bags, right now you can buy multiple stickers because if you have multiple vehicles.
Right.
So,
Oh, jeez.
oh yeah, well I have 3 cars. I mean, you literally have to show registration, but a lot of people have multiple cars. They could buy, you know, dump stickers for each of the cars, and then they would have,
Well, you say you're not buying dump stickers, we're giving them out. So
Well, no, but I'm
give
saying
out-
if
give
you-
out
if-
2 or 3 if you got
Right, if
multiple
you're just
cars.
tracking registration numbers.
right.
Yeah.
So
So
the
you have to
allotment
track
per
an address and
household
say,
is-
okay, you know, we're gonna write down the address, and then they would have to look up the address.
We need to
So-
be able to come up with some plausible scenarios, because these are questions that are gonna come up.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, these are just questions I envision.
Yeah,
coming up.
I think we have to say that you only get 12 free bags per address, not per
Right.
Household.
registered vehicle.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point.
And then the distribution. I was envisioning a coupon, but then how do you get the coupon to the households? I was told you cannot, like with
Well,
the
you
tax
could- you-
bill, you cannot send anything in the tax bill other than the tax bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we asked about that in
Yeah.
the past.
We
well,
wanted to
well,
send
at the
them-
transfer station, once you verify. So you come with your car, your registration. You present it. They look up the address. Okay, you haven't been here before this year. Okay, here's your dump sticker, and here's a coupon at Fern's for 12 free bags. You could do it that way, and that way they don't have to sell bags. They don't have to stock them there,
Right,
and the traffic goes to Fern's,
right.
the foot traffic, which Fern's would like. So that's probably the best way to do it.
But they're also gonna have to dedicate somebody at the transfer station to do that.
Well, yeah.
Well,
You could do it on limited hours, though. You could make it known that if
Oh,
you're gonna
that's
bring
true.
a big appliance and drop it off, that you have to pay for it, you can only do it between,
Well, but for the 12 free bags coupon, you know, I mean,
and dump sticker, you could only do it between these 3 hours, or
yeah, or
whatever.
not. You know, we don't sell anything from like the busiest time at the transfer station. Often it's like at the end of the day. There's
Right.
like a big rush on for. So after
Yeah.
noon, you know, you have to come in the morning to buy your dump sticker and or you know,
Big
drop it.
appliances
or during or Tuesday or Wednesday.
and are we gonna have like a time limit? Look, these are now in the weeds, but I think they're all questions that come up. For example, you know, well, if we don't have a transfer station car sticker situation, and it's just the bags, then it's basically any time that people wanna get those bags or their coupon, or are we gonna have a limited time period of, say, 2 weeks on these days, these hours, when you can get your coupons?
Yeah, I mean,
Do we wanna control that? If we're gonna start a program in September, say, which is not gonna happen in September, but would we wanna say that you've got these 2 weeks in August before we start the program to pick up your free bags?
right.
Well,
Right.
if they don't get to use the transfer.
Right, I mean,
they
yeah,
can pick-
yeah. I think it would be nice to make the bags available before the cutoff point so that, you know, there's not a mad rush, you know, at Fern's or whatever, and, but yeah, initially they'll have to stock a lot of bags, like 1,800 packages of bags,
Right.
right?
18, yeah.
Because,
Yeah,
and I don't know
1800
what
times 12.
Well,
volume-wise
they're
what that
different
looks like. They're pretty small because they don't put it in a box. Like Waste Zero actually tries to
Minimize
eat
the
their own dog food. So the bags are like wrapped in a very thin, clear plastic bag with just like a little piece of paper that says what what it is.
Right.
So the volume is pretty small. It's like maybe 1.5 inches in diameter, about 8 inches, 10 inches long. So you multiply that. If that's 12, we could do the math and figure out what the volume is going to be. But it might not be actually that big. It might be like the size of those 9 water bottles. There would be my guess. The volume wise.
The volume of
The
2
one-
or 3 compost bins that they didn't have room for.
Yeah. Right. But we're talking ferns now because we're talking about a coupon.
Well, ferns, yeah.
Right. So it would be ferns would have to have some place to put this stuff.
But we also want for the person who shows up and doesn't have a bag, oh, I forgot to get my bags, well, here, you can have this bag. Or if they just get turned away, you can go get your bag at Ferns. And Ferns has decent hours, I mean, they're open.
Yeah, their hours overlap with the transfer station, so that's not a problem.
Well, okay. So, you're gonna minimize this.
Yeah, I think we should delete 2 of the 4 columns, so we
And
have
just
just
stick with the
a
40.
status quo, and then here's our proposal, and then just call it that. And then if they say, well, what happens if we don't get 44%? Then you can then explain and say, well, we can model that, and actually, if we're less, we do,
Right.
the worse we do, the more money we make, the better it looks for the property taxes. And then you don't have to, obviously it's implied that it goes the other way if you're successful, but I think the skepticism is going to be on how much you reduce it. So you can present that as an upside,
Are you up to trying to model, what'd you call it, there's a term that you used for a use basis case or something?
Oh, a use case. Yeah, I'll try to come up with, I guess,
Household of 2 retirees.
household of 2 and maybe 3 and 4, and then just leave it at
And
that.
that's it, yeah.
With composting and without composting. Because I think that will also explain, that'll be a nice little table to
Encourage.
to say why we're doing composting, right? Because look, people can actually save money, yeah.
It's late. Dan, I got your comments, so we're gonna stick with those 4 bullets. I'll do what I can to align them later on
Okay,
in
good.
the thing. And, any questions that you have, I'll put in the right table so that your 264K will go in there instead of 254. And what else? You said you'd send me the compacted grant.
I just sent 2 emails to everybody.
Excellent. Helen, I owe you.
Did you get them? Did you get my email?
I got the first one.
Okay, so then I Lion, Lyon.
Lyons.
Oh, Lions. Oh, maybe you didn't get the second one then.
I got the first one.
Okay.
What's it? What are we gonna shoot for a timeline?
Well, yeah, I think, well, that's the question. Unless there are boards of an ATF meeting before January 8th, we're gonna have limited success. You already said Board of Health. Well, I can try and contact the chairs of some of these boards. Does that sound like a good idea? And just say, here's our deal, and the meetings are short, but we wanted to give you a heads up on what we're gonna be proposing, or not? Or just let it all hit the fan when Mosquito writes it all up on January 8th?
We still gotta meet with the board of selectmen on the 8th.
Well, that's
Will
the
the-
day,
will
it's
the
easy to
report-
change it, but the
Will
question
the
is,
report be in final form, or good long
if,
form by
if we are presenting, we have to have it in final form the week before, right? They
Yeah.
want it Thursday, minimally, the Thursday before, the meeting, so that's that first week in January.
Yeah,
Wednesday next meeting, 2 weeks after that?
Mhm.
'cause, yeah.
I mean, I talked with Tim, I said, look, there's a possibility we may want to extend this because we're trying to meet with these boards. He said it's not a problem to move it. So that's the question, do we wanna move it to a different date, the last week in January?
I just think it's gonna be hard to, over the next week to get this finished up.
Yeah, there's still some work,
This would have to be done in like a week.
yeah,
Finalized
with the
in like a
holidays
week
and
to get
everything.
together. And,
Alright, I'm gonna move that we, ask Tim to put us on the agenda for the second January meeting of the BOS. Gives us time to really get our ducks in a row and meet potentially with a few more people. I did call Mike Campbell from, Waste Management, no response yet, so we'll
Oh.
see. I dropped Julia's name, hoping that would help. So we'll see, if he doesn't call me tomorrow, I can be very persistent. I'll just show up.
Yeah,
That's
that works.
another approach. Did I send you Jim Snyder Grant's response
Yes.
to me? That's where he talks about it's an enterprise fund,
yeah,
which is another way of saying self-funded.
right.
Yeah, so,
so
anyway,
why don't we shoot for the 8th for having a final
Yeah.
document?
that sounds good.
Alright, we'll meet here on the 8th. Well, but sometime
That's a
that,
Tuesday, we know it's a Tuesday.
sometime, anytime that week, whenever.
Yep.
That week
So,
or
the
whenever.
week,
Yeah, cause that still gives us a week
could be,
Yeah,
to make any other changes before we have to submit it to the BOS before their meeting. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd like them to have it.
as far ahead as possible.
And I'll send you the report from New Hampshire.
That'd be wonderful.
New Hampshire State background for background. We can give you loads of data if you're interested.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
I'm here.
We wanna pick a night now and check the schedule.
Let's just pick it because things get kind of
The
crazy.
8th must be a Tuesday.
8th is a Tuesday because it's
So
a
we-
BOS
so
meeting, right?
Either the 8th, either the 8th or the 9th.
I don't have
Or
my
7th.
calendar here with me,
Okay.
so I'm not quite sure what I'm free.
Do you just want to shoot an email out to people?
Yeah, I'll send out an email.
Yeah, asking for the good
The
day.
eighth?
Yeah, for either
The 8th would be
the
good.
8th or 9th
Yeah.
or 7th. I'll put out a few dates and see which ones work, so I can get an email off to the
Yeah,
town
because-
clerk before because I'm going away over the weekend, over holiday,
Right.
Christmas, New Year's weekend.
Oh, good.
So here's an example of a picture taken at the transfer station as they're leaving. I determined that the best place to,
Oh,
This is when you took with your
Yeah,
kids.
you're
with the
kidding.
camera
Really?
is to catch people when they're leaving because
Yeah.
it's more kind of constrained.
Yep,
And there's, you can park a camera right in the back of one
right.
of those sheds.
Everybody goes out the same narrow slot.
Right, right. And this image was able to read that accurately.
That's very
The
good.
Google Cloud has
Really?
image recognition thing, so you can pick off this license plate. So
Wow.
this would be a way to do it.
So
But
Claude-
it involves the cooperation of the DPW staff, and if, the idea would be to leave the camera unattended, right? Because I don't want to be sitting there babysitting
Right.
the camera.
Right.
But if it accidentally gets unplugged, that kind of thing. In other words,
mhm.
if people are willing to put trash on people's lawns to defeat pay-as-you-throw,
Unplug that camera.
unplugging a camera in their own workplace, right?
Do we need to advertise the fact that we're doing this?
Well, I think it's tricky because, there's this whole issue of
Big Brother.
privacy, Big Brother, that whole thing, and people, some people are very, very sensitive to that. So it's a whole can of worms,
But this is not, well,
Well, I don't understand.
this is not
Once
a
you
public,
collect-
it's the town land, but it's not open to the general public, it's open to people who have permission to be there.
Right.
Well, except that's what you're trying to get worked out with town council, that it would be a trespass
So,
violation.
so, yeah,
Right.
so, monitoring who's coming, that
This
is
is
almost
all-
implied.
Right, true. What's the difference between having somebody writing the license plates down and, doing this? But,
Right, cause checking for your stickers is almost the same as checking the license plate, because you have to show your registration to get your sticker.
right, and the sticker has your license plate on it.
Right,
So, yeah, I mean, there is,
But then
Yeah.
how do you do the cross-check there?
well, you collect and
not
then you give it to
license
the
plate.
police. I went and asked for the list from the police, they said, well, we're not gonna give that to you because it has addresses on it.
Right.
Yeah, he
But
told
I
me.
figured that
Same
if
thing.
we give him a list of license plate numbers and you say, can you tell me which ones of these are on the thing? And then he'll say, well, it'll take me forever. I said, no, you just use Excel. I'll show you how to do it, it's really quick.
But who's gonna enter all those license plates into an Excel spreadsheet so that it can be given to them?
Well,
It's
you
all-
can write software to do
It's
it
all
all.
on
You can't?
Yeah.
Even it's attached to the camera? I mean,
I have software that will take these pictures based on motion, right? It does,
Right.
and then you write some code that uploads it to the Amazon cloud. It does all the image, comes up with all the license plate numbers. You put that in a, you just,
Dump it into a
it's all code.
oh, that's,
It's not hard. Once you, like for instance,
once you know how to do it.
yeah. Well, this is what I do for a living, so
Right.
it's not. But for instance, I got the data about the histogram of the closures of the landfills. That's presented as a PDF document with, it's not really structured.
Right.
So I cut and paste that into a text file, and then I wrote a little bit of code that goes through, and it looked for a particular acronym that, was uniquely placed within each block of each town, and then I knew that 2 lines above that point, or 2 lines below that point, or no, the next line, were the dates when the landfills were closed. So then, so I was able to quickly extract 900 things, as opposed to having to go through the
Oh my
thing and
God.
write it down. So if you write
If
little
you don't
pieces
do
of
it.
code, you can kind of manage
Automate it.
information, and yeah, it's not hard. So it's more fun to write code than it is to sit there going through 900 different things, typing it in,
Right.
So,
That's really
and your accuracy is much higher, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
less human
it's,
error.
yeah, the software doesn't get bored or tired or
Right.
see double vision, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would be possible to capture these things. The barrier I see is that, people will complain about, get wind of it, and then there'll be a big ruckus about it. Or it could be sabotaged by individuals, like unplugging cameras or knocking the camera over or bumping into it. All you have to do is
put a
change,
bag over it,
put a bag over it, right, or just bump it a little bit, and so it's pointing,
up in the air.
yeah, up in the air,
Bird
or
watching.
at the side of the shed, or down to the ground, and then now you've got a big gap in your data. But I guess it's worth a try.
Yeah, well, the privacy issue. But you're right, and I think if you try to keep something like this quiet, then that lends to the suspicion out there, oh, they're doing this really horrible thing. I don't know how you advertise, you're gonna invite, no matter what you do, you're gonna invite problems in terms of people's reaction to it, I think.
Well, maybe just threatening to do it will
Yeah, no.
increase compliance, right?
Oh, it's like the cameras that they have in schools or buses that don't
Don't
really
work.
run
Yeah,
anything.
exactly, exactly.
That's all I think.
Actually, there are cameras at the transfer station mounted on the buildings. There's like 2 sets of them, and they don't work. But I think it was one of the employees
On the
on the little
compactor
shed.
sheds?
Yes, look closely next time you're there, and you'll see. They're small. They're about this
Yeah.
big. They're little webcam type cameras, and I think it was
Well, they-
one of the employees. He just wanted to, and he had like a little screen inside,
So
you
you
could
could see.
could be in the building and see. So it's not without precedent that there are cameras monitoring, and I don't know whether he was recording the images as well as just displaying them, right?
Interesting.
It's not like this would be the first camera there at the transfer station. And another way to monitor things is to have a camera, with a disc recorder, and then if there's a bag, you can go backwards in time and say, okay, here's evidence, right?
Yeah.
It's not me saying that I saw you throw the black bag in. Here's you coming out of your car with the black bag and you threw it in.
Well, the thing is, the rationale for this is because there is so much concern in town that there are people from out of town using this. This isn't to spy on people who live in Carlisle. This is to determine, is there a problem here with out of towners or is there not?
Just to
Right.
protect our residents' budget.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's a valuable resource. getting rid of your trash is actually a valuable service. It's become more and more valuable over time, and so, yeah.
Anyway, alright, so,
So I'll stop YouTube after after you guys close the meeting.
Okay,
We done?
I think we're adjourned.
We're done?
Okay.
do we have to move to adjourn, or?
We usually just say we're done.
Oh, okay. Then I'll take that as a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
So